Hey guys, tonight we're slipping through the marble corridors of Topkapi Palace in 16th century Istanbul, where you're about to spend an entire day as a palace servant, one of thousands of invisible hands that keep the Ottoman Empire's beating heart alive. You can smell the rosewater splashed on cool stone floors, feel the weight of silk cushions you'll carry from room to room, and hear the distant fountain that never stops trickling in the third court. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, like why empires rise and fall not on battlefields alone, but in the whispered secrets between a servant and a wall. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below, but make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Tell me where you're watching from tonight, or share what draws you to these Ottoman mysteries. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. Your eyes open in darkness. Not the comfortable darkness of a bedroom with moonlight filtering through curtains, but the thick, pressing darkness of a windowless chamber deep within Topkapi Palace. You share this space with 11 other servants, bodies pressed together on thin cotton mattresses laid directly on stone. Someone near your feet is snoring softly. The air smells of bodies, of the lavender sachets hanging from hooks to mask the human scent, of old wool and the faint musk of the olive oil lamps that burned until midnight. You have no clock, no device to check, but your body knows. Dawn approaches. In perhaps 20 minutes, the first call to prayer will echo from the minaret surrounding the palace complex, and you must be awake, dressed, and at your station before that happens. You sit up carefully, feeling the stiffness in your lower back. You're 16 years old, or maybe 17, you're not entirely sure anymore, and already your body aches like someone twice your age. The palace takes its toll in ways you never imagined when you first arrived 3 years ago. Back then, you were a terrified child from a village in Serbia, taken during the devshirme system, the child levy that supplied the Ottoman court with fresh servants and future janissaries. You remember crying yourself to sleep for months, whispering prayers in Serbian when no one could hear, clutching a small wooden cross you managed to hide in your clothing. That cross is long gone now, confiscated during your first week. But you've survived. Survival is its own kind of victory here. You stand, your bare feet finding the cold stone floor. In the darkness, you move by memory to the copper basin near the door. Someone, probably Aishi, who has the late night shift, has already filled it with fresh water. You splash your face, gasping quietly at the cold shock. The water runs down your neck, soaking the collar of your thin sleeping shift. Around you, other servants are beginning to stir. The soft rustle of fabric, the quiet groans of bodies reluctant to face another 18-hour day. No one speaks. Speaking before morning prayers is discouraged, though not explicitly forbidden. It's one of those unwritten rules you've learned through observation, through watching others receive sharp looks or quiet reprimands. You dress quickly in the uniform that marks your station. Loose cotton trousers, a simple tunic cinched with a cloth belt, soft leather slippers that make no sound on marble. The fabric is clean but worn, mended in places where seams have split. Palace servants are kept presentable but not ornate. You're meant to fade into the background, to become part of the architecture itself. You're furniture with a pulse, as one of the older servants once joked bitterly. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman palace system was more humane than European serfdom, or simply more organised in its exploitation, but from inside these walls such debates seem absurdly distant. The room is starting to lighten almost imperceptibly. Dawn is creeping toward Istanbul. You file out with the others, moving through a narrow corridor that leads to one of the palace's countless courtyards. This one is small, utilitarian, nowhere near the famous grand courtyards that visiting ambassadors see. This is a servant's space, bordered by plain walls, containing only a simple fountain for ablutions and a few struggling rosemary bushes in ceramic pots. The sky above is turning from black to deep purple, stars still visible, Venus brilliant in the east. You perform your morning washing ritual at the fountain, the required ablution before prayer. The water is shockingly cold. It comes from underground cisterns that maintain an almost freezing temperature year-round. You wash your hands 3 times, rinse your mouth, splash water on your face, run wet hands through your hair, wash your arms to the elbows, wipe your head, clean your ears, and finally wash your feet. The ritual is precise, methodical, almost meditative. Even though you were raised Christian, you've learned to find a strange comfort in these repeated patterns. Ritual gives shape to chaos. Structure makes the unbearable bearable. The call to prayer begins just as you finish. The muezzin's voice floats across the palace complex, across all of Istanbul, that haunting melody that you've now heard thousands of times. You line up with the other servants facing east toward Mecca and bow through the prescribed prostrations. Your lips move through the Arabic phrases you've memorized phonetically. Do you believe them? You're not sure anymore. Belief has become complicated, layered, something you can't quite examine too closely without feeling dizzy. You pray in Arabic, but sometimes, in the deepest part of your mind, you're still whispering in Serbian to a god you're no longer certain is listening. Prayer ends. The sun is properly rising now, spilling gold across the palace rooftops, catching the domes and minarets, transforming the city into something mythical. For just a moment, you allow yourself to feel the beauty of it. Then the moment passes. The head servant, a stern woman named Gulbahar, who's been in the palace for 30 years, appears in the courtyard entrance. She claps twice, sharply. This sound echoes off stone walls. You and the others immediately straighten. Gulbahar's eyes scan the group, checking for anyone dishevelled, anyone not quite ready. Her gaze passes over you without pausing. Good. Invisibility is safety here. Harem quarters, she says simply. Morning service. You follow her and 5 others through a maze of corridors. After 3 years, you know perhaps a third of the palace's layout. The complex is enormous, spread across 70 acres, containing hundreds of rooms, multiple courtyards, gardens, pavilions, and secret passages you're only dimly aware of. The architecture itself is a form of control. You can't rebel against what you can't map, can't escape from what you can't fully comprehend. Some servants have been here for decades and still discover new rooms, new passageways, new secrets hidden in plain sight. The harem quarters are waking as you arrive. You can hear water being poured, soft voices, the rustle of expensive fabrics. Your job this morning is simple. You'll help prepare the Sultan's younger daughters for their day, carrying water, arranging clothing, standing ready to fulfill any request. It sounds easy. It never is. The daughters are children, 8, 10, and 13 years old. But they've been raised as royalty in the world's most powerful empire. They can be sweet and they can be casually cruel, often within the same breath. They've never known anything but service, never dressed themselves, never fetched their own water. You're less than human to them, more like an animated doll, and yet their favour can make your life easier. Their displeasure can make it hell. You enter the daughter's chamber just as sunlight begins streaming through latticed windows, casting geometric patterns across silk carpets worth more than your entire village could earn in a generation. The smallest princess is already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed, demanding honeyed almonds and pomegranate juice. You bow low and move to fulfill her request, your day truly beginning. Above you, painted on the ceiling, golden stars shine against a lapis lazuli sky. Beautiful, suffocating. Home. The hierarchy you navigate is more complex than the empire's military ranks, more nuanced than the sultan's governing councils, more dangerous than any battlefield. You exist within a system so elaborate that most outsiders cannot comprehend it, and even you, after 3 years, still discover new layers of authority, new invisible lines you didn't know you'd crossed until someone corrects you with a slap or a sharp word. At the very bottom are the asimi, the novices, the newly arrived children still crying at night, still stumbling through Turkish phrases, still flinching at every shadow. You remember being asimi. You remember the terror of not understanding what was expected, of trying to decode gestures and expressions, of feeling utterly alone in a sea of strangers. Above the novices are the regular servants like yourself, the churak, the apprentices who've survived long enough to learn the basic rhythms, to memorize the important faces, to understand which rules are absolute and which have flexibility. You carry water, arrange cushions, serve meals, clean chambers, run messages between quarters. You're useful but replaceable, a fact made clear every few months when someone disappears, sent away for incompetence, or married off to a janissary, or occasionally just vanished with no explanation given. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman palace was more brutal or more benign than other contemporary courts, but from your position, the question feels academic. Brutality and benevolence are irrelevant when you have no choice but to endure either. Then come the specialized servants, those who've developed particular skills, the embroiderers who work on the Sultan's kaftans, the musicians who play for harem entertainment, the calligraphers who copy religious texts, the physicians who tend to minor ailments. These servants have leverage, something valuable to offer beyond basic labor. They sleep in better quarters, receive better food, occasionally even pocket money for exceptional work. You've considered trying to develop such a skill. You have a decent singing voice, your mother said. But specialization requires training time, requires someone willing to teach you, requires catching the right person's attention in the right way. So far, you've remained generalized, safely anonymous in your adequacy. Higher still are the kalfas, the senior female servants who supervise entire sections of the harem. These are women who've spent 20, 30, even 40 years in palace service, who know every secret, every scandal, every skeleton tucked away in decorative chests. They're usually former concubines who never quite caught the Sultan's eye consistently enough to bear children, or servants who demonstrated exceptional loyalty and competence. They wield significant informal power. They control work assignments, determine who gets punished for infractions, decide who receives training opportunities. Cross a kalfa and your life becomes miserable in countless small ways. Earn a kalfa's favour and doors open, sometimes quite literally. But even the kalfas bow before the true powers in the harem, the eunuchs. The harem is guarded and administered by eunuchs, men castrated before puberty and trained specifically for palace service. They're the only males besides the Sultan and his young sons permitted in the women's quarters, and they exploit this unique position ruthlessly. The system divides them into two groups: the white eunuchs, usually from the Balkans or Caucasus, who serve in the outer palace sections, and the black eunuchs from Africa, who control the harem itself. The black eunuchs hold the real power. Their chief, the Kisla Aasa, is one of the most influential people in the entire empire. Sometimes wealthier than provincial governors, always feared, occasionally loved. In that complicated way you might love a strict parent who sometimes shows unexpected kindness. You've had limited direct contact with the eunuchs, which is probably fortunate. They exist in a strange social limbo, neither male nor female, neither slave nor free, neither powerless nor quite powerful enough to feel secure. This in-between status makes some of them compassionate, understanding what it means to exist in categories others can't quite comprehend. But it makes others cruel, eager to exercise what authority they have over those even more vulnerable. The current chief black eunuch is named Suleiman Aa, a massive man whose voice never quite lost its boyish pitch, whose face shows no beard but whose eyes reveal decades of witnessing palace intrigues. He passes through the harem occasionally, and when he does, everyone becomes instantly attentive, instantly obedient, instantly terrified. There's a story you've heard whispered among the servants, probably apocryphal but illustrative. A young eunuch once fell in love, proper romantic love, with a concubine. Impossible love, of course. Love that could never be consummated, love that violated every rule. They would pass notes, exchange glances, meet in gardens for conversations that were all they could ever have. Someone reported them. The concubine was sewn into a weighted sack and drowned in the Bosphorus, the traditional punishment for harem sexual misconduct, though technically no sex had occurred. The eunuch was forced to carry her body to the boat. He left the palace that night and was never seen again. Whether he fled or was killed, no one knows. The story's lesson is clear. Even feelings are dangerous here. Even unexpressed desire can destroy you. You're thinking about this as you fold silk scarves in the princess's chamber, arranging them by colour in a cedarwood chest. The youngest princess, Mirima, is watching you with curious eyes. She's 8 years old, dressed in a tiny caftan of pale blue silk, embroidered with silver thread, her dark hair already pinned up elaborately with pearl-headed pins. She looks like a doll, perfect and slightly unreal. "What's your name?" she asks suddenly. This is unusual. Royalty rarely asks servants their names. "Aishi," you say quietly, giving the Turkish name you were assigned when you entered palace service. Your birth name is forgotten. No, not forgotten. Deliberately not remembered. Remembering hurts too much. "Where are you from, Aish?" Mirima persists. Her older sisters are still sleeping, and her usual playmate, another servant's daughter, is sick today. She's bored and you're convenient. "From far away, my princess. A small village." You keep your tone neutral, pleasant, but not too warm. Warmth might be mistaken for familiarity, and familiarity is dangerous. Were you sad to come here? The question is innocent, childish curiosity, but it cuts like a blade. "I was honoured to serve the Sultan's household, my princess." The formula rolls off your tongue automatically. She tilts her head, studying you. 8 years old and already learning to see through polite lies. That's not what I asked. For a moment, you're tempted to tell her the truth. To say yes. "I was devastated. I cried until I vomited. I wanted to die. I still sometimes want to die." But that would be monumentally stupid, so instead you smile gently. "I was young, my princess. Young people are often frightened of new things, but the palace is a great blessing." She seems satisfied with this, or at least bored enough to move on. "Do you have a mother?" Yes, my princess. Far away. Probably, possibly, you haven't heard anything about your family in 3 years. For all you know, they're all dead. I have 3 mothers, Mihrima says proudly. She means the Sultan's 3 current favourites, the women who bore his children and thus elevated themselves above all other concubines. My real mother is the prettiest. Everyone says so. You nod solemnly. Of course, my princess. She loses interest in you then, distracted by a toy, a small mechanical bird that flaps its wing when wound. You return to folding scarves, grateful for the dismissal. These brief conversations are exhausting, requiring constant vigilance, constant calculation. Say too little and seem sullen. Say too much and seem presumptuous. Express no personality but don't seem robotic. It's a tightrope walk every time. By the time you finish organising the wardrobe, the older princesses are waking. The 13-year-old Fatma is irritable this morning, snapping at everyone, sending back her breakfast tray because the yogurt isn't cold enough, because the honey is crystallised, because the bread isn't fresh from the oven. You and another servant rush to fetch replacements, while a Kalfa soothes the princess with gentle words and promises of an afternoon in the gardens. Fatma is old enough to be married soon. Royal daughters are usually wed by 14 or 15, and everyone knows she's anxious about it, wondering which prince or governor will be chosen, whether she'll be sent away from Istanbul to some distant province. Her irritability is fear wearing a crown. You understand this, even sympathise, but sympathy doesn't make her any less exhausting to serve. The morning routine of dressing young Ottoman royalty is not the simple task you might imagine. Pulling on a dress, tying a sash, brushing hair. No, it's a ceremony as complex as any religious ritual, as precise as watchmaking, as fraught with potential disaster as handling explosives. You stand to the side with 3 other servants while the Kalfa Zeynep directs operations with the authority of a military commander. Princess Fatma sits on a low-cushioned stool before an enormous mirror framed in mother of pearl, her face still puffy from sleep, her mood still dangerous. The 10-year-old Selim waits her turn by the window, watching birds in the garden below. Little Mihrima has been dressed already. Her wardrobe is simpler, befitting her age, and she's been sent off with her tutor for morning lessons in Arabic calligraphy. You're handed a copper basin filled with warm water scented with orange blossom. You carry it carefully to Fatma, kneeling beside her stool, holding it steady while Zeynep dips a cloth and gently washes the princess's face. The water temperature must be precisely right. Too hot and you'll hear about it. Too cold and you'll hear about it differently but equally unpleasantly. You got it right today. Small mercy. The cloth moves over Fatma's skin in careful strokes, removing the night's oils, preparing her face for the cosmetics that will come later. Ottoman princesses don't wear heavy makeup like European royalty, but there's still kohl for the eyes, rouge for the cheeks, sometimes a light powder to even the complexion. Once her face is clean, the real work begins. Another servant brings forward the inner garments, a thin cotton chemise that goes on first, so fine you can nearly see through it, embroidered at the neckline with tiny flowers in white thread. Over this comes the shalva, the loose silk trousers that are a cornerstone of Ottoman dress. These aren't just any shalva, they're made of emerald silk so lustrous it seems to glow, gathered at the ankle with gold thread, the waistband encrusted with seed pearls. You help guide Fatma's feet through the legs, pulling the fabric up carefully, ensuring it doesn't wrinkle or catch. The princess stands and Zeynep ties the waistband with practiced efficiency. Next comes the inner robe, a kaftan of pale yellow silk lined with rabbit fur despite the warmth of the season. Layers are important in Ottoman fashion. They create the silhouette, the sense of wealth and substance. You hold the robe open while Fatma slides her arms through the long sleeves. The fabric whispers as it settles over her shoulders. Then comes the outer robe, the real showpiece, a deep crimson caftan with sleeves so long they hang past Fatma's hands, nearly touching the floor. This is the traditional style for royalty. The longer the sleeves, the higher the status, the more you can afford to be utterly impractical. The crimson silk is embroidered with gold thread in patterns of tulips and roses, and the front opening is edged with genuine ermine fur, each tiny black-tipped tail perfectly preserved. Historians still argue whether Ottoman dress influenced European fashion or vice versa, but standing here holding pins while Zeynep adjusts the drape of a sleeve, you think the question misses the point. Fashion is always about power, about signalling who matters and who doesn't. These layers of silk, this abundance of embroidery, these impractical sleeves, they all announce that Princess Fatma has dozens of servants to dress her, that she'll never need to use her hands for actual work, that her value lies in her bloodline and her beauty, not in anything she might do or create. It's a costume that simultaneously elevates and imprisons her. The belt comes next, a wide sash of woven gold thread studded with rubies. It takes two of you to wrap it properly, crossing it in the back, bringing the ends around to tie in front. The weight of it surprises you every time. This belt probably cost more than your entire village earned in a decade. Fatma adjusts it slightly, frowning at her reflection. She's looking for flaws, for any imperfection that might give her a reason to complain, but even she can't find fault today. She looks magnificent, like something from a Persian miniature painting come to life. Now comes the most delicate part, the hair. Fatma's hair is her pride, thick, black, falling to her waist when loose. But it can never be loose in public, never be seen by anyone outside the family except in its arranged state. Zeynep sits behind the princess and begins the elaborate process while you hand her the tools she needs. A wooden comb with fine teeth, a brush made from boar bristles, small silk ribbons in various colours, hairpins carved from ivory, and finally, pearl-headed pins that will secure the entire structure. The style today is intricate. Zeynep parts the hair down the middle, then creates dozens of tiny braids starting at Fatma's temples, working backward. Each braid is secured with a ribbon, then the braids are woven together into a larger pattern at the back of the head, studded with pearls at regular intervals. It takes nearly an hour. You watch, fascinated despite yourself, as order emerges from chaos, as Zeynep's fingers work with the unconscious grace of someone who's done this thousands of times. She could probably do it in complete darkness and still achieve perfection. While Zeynep works, Princess Selim grows impatient by the window. "When is my turn?" she whines. "I want to go to the garden." "Soon, my star," Zeynep says without turning around, without even slowing her braiding. Patience is the virtue of princesses. "Patience is boring," Selim mutters, but she subsides. You hide a smile. For a moment she seems like any ordinary 10-year-old girl, bored and restless, not a princess in the world's most powerful empire. Finally, Fatma's hair is complete. Zeynep places the final ornament, a jewelled hairpiece that sits like a small crown at the front of the elaborate braids. It catches the morning light streaming through the windows, scattering rainbow fragments across the wall. Fatma studies herself in the mirror, turning her head slightly left, then right. She's looking for a reason to complain, you can tell, but there isn't one. "Acceptable," she says finally, "the closest thing to praise you'll get today." Your turn. Princess Selim," Zeynep announces, and Selim practically bounces to the stool. Her energy is completely different from her older sisters. Where Fatma is anxious and irritable, Selim is excited, treating the whole process like a game. She chatters constantly while being dressed, telling stories about a dream she had involving a talking cat and a palace made of sugar, asking questions about everything. "Why are the buttons made of jade? Can I have a dress made entirely of pearls? Do you think birds get tired of flying? Will there be pomegranates in the garden today?" You answer when appropriate, hand forward garments when needed, and generally try to keep up with Selim's whirlwind personality. Her outfit today is less formal than Fatma's, a lavender silk kaftan over rose-coloured shalva, with simpler embroidery and fewer jewels. She's younger, not yet quite at the age where every public appearance is a political statement, but she still looks impossibly elegant, impossibly wealthy, impossibly removed from the world you came from, where children wore wool that scratched and went barefoot from spring through autumn. As you're helping with Selim's belt, silver thread rather than gold, set with amethysts rather than rubies, she looks directly at you with curious brown eyes. "Do you have sisters?" she asks. The question hits you like a physical blow. You do, or did. 2 younger sisters back in that Serbian village that feels like another lifetime. You wonder if they were taken in a later devshirme levy, or if they're still there, growing up without you, forgetting your face. "Yes, my princess," you manage. 2. "I wish I had just 2, Selim sighs dramatically. Having 4 brothers and 3 sisters is exhausting. There's never enough attention. You want to laugh at this, the princess complaining about having too much family while you'd give anything to see yours again, but you keep your face neutral. "A large family is a blessing, my princess." "That's what everyone says," Selim agrees cheerfully, "but I think they're just being polite." Her hair is simpler than Fatma's, just 2 thick braids wound around her head like a crown, decorated with small silver flowers. It takes only 20 minutes, and then she's released, darting toward the door like a prisoner granted freedom. "Garden time," she announces to no one in particular, and she's gone, her minders scrambling to follow. You gather the discarded clothes, the sleeping shifts, the simple house robes they wore before dressing, and carry them to the laundry servants. Your arms are full of silk that smells of rosewater and youth and unconscious privilege. Behind you, you hear Zeynep beginning the process with yet another royal child, this one a young prince who's visiting his sisters. The morning is only beginning. You have 14 more hours before you can collapse on that thin mattress in that windowless room, and already your back aches from all the bowing, all the kneeling, all the careful subservience that keeps you safe. You descend into the palace kitchens through a narrow servants' staircase that spirals down and down, the air growing progressively warmer, thicker, more aromatic with each step. The stone walls are slick with condensation, and you press one hand against them for balance as you navigate the worn steps that countless feet have polished smooth over centuries. This smell hits you first, a complex symphony of spices, roasting meat, baking bread, smoke from wood fires, the sharp tang of vinegar, the sweetness of honey, and underneath it all the unavoidable scent of human sweat. Hundreds of people work in these kitchens, hundreds, and right now they're all preparing the midday meal for the various households within the palace complex. The kitchen complex is vast beyond comprehension. Not one kitchen, but dozens, each dedicated to specific tasks or serving specific populations. There's the Sultan's kitchen, naturally the most important, where his meals are prepared with obsessive attention to detail and security. There's the harem kitchen, serving the women and children of the imperial family. There's the janissary kitchen, feeding the elite soldiers who guard the palace. There's the servants' kitchen where your own meals come from. There are pastry kitchens, sweet kitchens, soup kitchens, bread ovens that run constantly, storage rooms that stretch like caverns, and at least one kitchen dedicated solely to preparing ceremonial meals for religious festivals. You emerge from the staircase into the main corridor, and the organised chaos nearly overwhelms you even after 3 years. Servants rush past carrying copper trays, clay pots, woven baskets of vegetables still glistening with washing water. The head cook's voice booms from somewhere deeper in the complex, shouting instructions in Turkish peppered with Arabic cooking terms. Someone drops something. You hear the crash of pottery, a shouted curse, laughter. The kitchens have their own culture, their own hierarchy, their own rules that operate somewhat independently from the rest of the palace. The head cook, Ibrahim R., is a massive man with burn scars up both forearms and a temperament like a summer storm. Sunny one moment, thunderous the next, but ultimately fair if you work hard and don't waste food. Your assignment today is helping with breakfast preparation for the harem. You're late to this shift because you were needed upstairs for the princess's dressing, but no one will fault you for that. Palace service requires flexibility. You might be assigned to one task but pulled away for another at any moment, and you're expected to adapt seamlessly. You find the harem kitchen section and report to Emily, a stout woman of perhaps 40, who's been working these kitchens since she was younger than you. Her hands are rough from decades of work, permanently stained with spices, but they move with balletic precision as she chops vegetables. "Finally," she says when she sees you, but there's no real reproach in her tone. "Take that tray," the one with the yogurt bowls, up to the second courtyard fountain. The concubines are taking breakfast outside today. And don't spill. That yogurt is strained, sweetened with honey from Mount Hymettus, and topped with pistachios ground so fine they're practically dust. If you spill it, Ibrahim R. will have your hide for a prayer mat. You carefully lift the tray. It's silver, probably worth more than you'll earn in your lifetime, holding a dozen small bowls of the precious yogurt. Each bowl is pottery painted with delicate blue designs, and each is indeed topped with a pale green dusting of pistachio. The tray is heavier than it looks. You balance it against your hip in the way you've learned, distributing the weight, and begin the journey back up to the surface world. The route requires navigating 3 different staircases and 2 courtyards, avoiding the main pathways where important people might be walking. Servants must stick to the margins, the edges, the less significant spaces. You pass other servants on similar missions, all of you engaged in this elaborate dance of logistics that keeps the palace fed. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman palace feeding systems were more efficient than contemporary European courts, but from your perspective, trudging upstairs with a heavy tray, the question seems ridiculous. Efficiency is irrelevant when you have unlimited servants. The system works because bodies like yours are expendable. You deliver the yogurt to a group of younger concubines who are indeed breakfasting by a fountain, laughing and gossiping in the morning sun. They barely glance at you as you set down the bowls, too absorbed in their conversation about a new eunuch who apparently has a beautiful singing voice and might perform at the next harem entertainment. You bow and withdraw, retracing your steps back to the kitchens where Emily immediately assigns you another task, peeling quince for a dessert that will be served at dinner. You settle onto a low stool in the corner with a basket of quince and a sharp knife. Around you, the kitchen's organised chaos continues. To your left, 3 women are rolling out dough for a pastry called gulyach, paper-thin sheets that will be layered with milk and nuts. To your right, a young boy, not much younger than you are, is turning a spit where an entire lamb rotates slowly over a charcoal fire. fat dripping and hissing in the flames. Further away, someone is pounding spices in a massive stone mortar. You can hear the rhythmic thud, thud, thud beneath all the other noise, and everywhere there's steam rising from pots, smoke curling toward ventilation shafts, the shimmer of heat that makes the air itself seem to dance. The quints are hard and fragrant, their skin a pale golden yellow. You peel them carefully, trying to create one long spiral of peel, rather than wasteful small pieces. This is partly pride. You've become good at peeling, and small accomplishments matter in a life largely devoid of achievement, and partly practicality. Ibrahim Ağa hates waste. He's been known to fly into genuine rage at servants who trim too much meat from bones, or throw away vegetable scraps that could go into soup stock. Food is precious, even in a palace of abundance, or perhaps especially in a palace of abundance. The empire feeds on agriculture, on the labour of millions of peasants in hundreds of provinces. Wasting food is wasting their labour, their lives. Also, Ibrahim Ağa lectures when he catches someone being careless. A quirky fact you've learned: the palace keeps detailed records of every ingredient used in these kitchens. Somewhere a clerk is writing down that you're peeling quints today, how many quints, what they'll be used for, how much sugar will sweeten them, how much butter will glaze them. The Ottoman bureaucracy is legendary for its record keeping. Centuries from now, if those records survive, someone could theoretically reconstruct the exact meals served in the palace on this specific date. The thought is oddly comforting, that your small labour, your peeling of quints in a hot kitchen, might be preserved somehow, might mean something beyond the immediate moment. You're halfway through the basket when the breakfast protocol begins for the Sultan himself. You hear the change in atmosphere before you see anything. Voices drop, movements become more precise, and a tension enters the air like the moment before a thunderstorm. A procession enters the kitchen. 12 men, all senior servants, all dressed more formally than usual. They're here to collect the Sultan's breakfast and escort it to his private chambers. The security around the Sultan's food is extreme. Every dish is prepared under observation. Every ingredient is tested by food tasters who eat portions of each dish before it's served. Every person who handles the food has been with the palace for years, their loyalty verified and re-verified. You watch from your corner, trying not to stare but unable to look away completely. The Sultan's breakfast emerges from the special kitchen. Honeyed yogurt in a gold bowl, fresh bread still steaming, grilled fish arranged artfully on a copper platter, fresh figs, pomegranates cut to reveal their jewelled seeds, tea in a porcelain cup so fine it's nearly translucent. The portions are modest. The Sultan apparently isn't a heavy breakfast eater, but the quality is unimaginable. That fish was swimming in the Bosphorus at dawn. Those figs were picked yesterday from the palace gardens. Everything is as fresh, as perfect, as humanly possible. The food taster steps forward, a thin man with a nervous disposition, which makes sense given that his job is literally to die if someone poisons the Sultan's food. He takes a small portion from each dish, eats carefully, then waits. Everyone waits. The kitchen falls completely silent except for the crackling of fires. 5 minutes pass. The taster remains standing, shows no signs of distress. He nods. The procession forms around the breakfast trays and moves out, heading toward the Sultan's quarters with the solemn dignity of priests carrying holy relics. The hammam, the bathhouse, is where the palace reveals its true nature as a place obsessed with purification, with cleanliness elevated to something approaching religious devotion. You enter through the servant's entrance carrying an armload of fresh linen towels, Still warm from being dried in the sun, smelling faintly of the lavender sachets stored with them. The air shifts immediately as you step inside, from the dry heat of midday Istanbul to the thick, humid embrace of the baths. Steam hangs in visible clouds, curling around marble columns, condensing on tiled walls, making everything slightly dreamlike and imprecise. Your clothes cling to your skin within moments. Breathing feels like drinking the air. The palace hammam is not one room but a series of interconnected chambers, each serving different functions, each maintaining different temperatures. There's the cold room where bathers first enter and gradually acclimate. There's the warm room for washing and scrubbing. There's the hot room, built directly over the furnaces that heat the entire complex, where the steam is so thick you can barely see your hand before your face. And there are private alcoves off the main chambers, where royalty can bathe without being observed by lesser beings like yourself. The entire complex is built on principles that go back to Roman times. Hippocausts beneath the floors carry hot air, heating the marble from below, so that even the coldest winter day cannot penetrate this sanctuary of warmth. You're here to assist with the late morning bathing session for several of the Sultan's concubines. This is considered relatively light duty. The truly exhausting work happens during the Sultan's own bath, which requires dozens of servants and takes hours, with every surface scrubbed beforehand, every corner inspected for cleanliness or potential danger. For the concubines, the requirements are less extreme but still demanding. You deposit your towels in the appropriate warming alcove, they must stay warm until needed, and report to the attendant, a severe woman named Hafsa, who's been running the hammam operations for 15 years. Section 3 needs scrubbing, she tells you, handing you a coarse cloth and a wooden bucket. The marble, every finger width of it. I found a water spot yesterday. A water spot, and I won't tolerate it again. This is the palace hammam, not some common bathhouse in the city where merchants wash their merchant filth. You take the cloth and bucket to Section 3, one of the warm rooms where concubines will soon be lounging on heated marble slabs, being massaged and oiled and pampered. Right now it's empty. Just you and the marble and the ever-present steam. You fill your bucket from one of the fountains. The water runs constantly, part of the elaborate plumbing system that feeds the entire palace. Ottoman engineers are masters of water management, you've learned. The palace has its own aqueducts, its own cisterns, its own distribution networks. Water is life. Water is power. Water is the difference between civilization and chaos. You kneel on the warm marble and begin to scrub. The cloth is rough enough to remove any build-up, but not so rough it will scratch the stone. You work in small circles, methodical, covering every inch of the platform where concubines will recline. The marble is pale green, shot through with white veins, quarried from somewhere in Anatolia, each slab worth a fortune. You're essentially polishing a floor made of jewellery. The absurdity of this doesn't escape you. Back in your village, people bathed in wooden tubs once a week if they were fortunate, once a month if they weren't. Here, royalty bathes daily, sometimes multiple times daily, in chambers more luxurious than most churches. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman emphasis on cleanliness was primarily religious. Islam requires ritual washing, or practical, a response to disease and the close quarters of urban living. From your position on your knees scrubbing marble, you think perhaps it's also about control. The bath is another place where the empire demonstrates its superiority, its access to resources, its ability to make even water bend to imperial will. To bathe in luxury is to demonstrate that you're beyond the concerns of ordinary people. that you live in a realm where even the basic functions of the body become aesthetic experiences. You finish the platform and move to the walls, scrubbing the tiles arranged in geometric patterns, stars and octagons in blue and white and turquoise. Ottoman tiles are famous throughout the known world, created in the kilns of Iznik, using techniques that produce colours no one else can quite replicate. That particular shade of blue, intense, luminous, somehow both earthy and celestial, is sought by European collectors who pay absurd prices for a single plate. Here, entire walls are covered in it. Thousands of tiles, each one a small masterpiece of craft, and you're wiping them with a damp rag to remove the faint residue of soap and minerals left by yesterday's bathers. The first concubines arrive while you're finishing the walls. You hear them before you see them. Laughter, conversation, the soft slap of bare feet on marble. You immediately shift to the side of the room, making yourself as inconspicuous as possible, eyes down. 4 young women enter, attended by 2 older female servants who will assist them. The concubines are wrapped in light cotton robes, their hair loose and flowing. They're excited, chattering about something. Apparently one of them received a gift from the Sultan last night, a bracelet of worked gold, and the others are examining it, exclaiming over the craftsmanship. You recognize one of them. Harem, a recent addition to the harem, originally from Ruthenia according to rumour. She has red gold hair, unusual and striking, and a sharp wit that makes her popular among the other women. She's the one with the bracelet, and she's holding her wrist up so the gold catches the light filtering through the high windows. It's beautiful, one of the others sighs. You must have pleased him greatly. Harem laughs. I simply listened. Men love nothing more than being listened to, as though their thoughts are profound revelations rather than the same things every other man thinks. The others giggle at this mild blasphemy. You keep your face carefully neutral, continue organising towels, pretending you can't hear their conversation. But you're listening, of course you're listening. These unguarded moments are windows into the lives of people whose power over you is absolute. Understanding them, even slightly, might someday be the difference between favour and punishment. The attendants help the concubines remove their robes, and they recline on the marble platforms you've just scrubbed. The actual bathing ritual begins. First comes the sweating, lying in the hot room until the pores open, until toxins are drawn to the surface of the skin. Then comes the scrubbing. The attendants use rough mitts made of goat hair to scrub every inch of the concubines' bodies, removing dead skin, stimulating circulation. You see clouds of grey residue coming off skin you would have sworn was already clean. The concubines endure this with varying degrees of grace. Harem jokes and chatters throughout. One of the others grits her teeth against the roughness. Another seems to fall into a meditative state. After scrubbing comes washing with soap. Not ordinary soap, but luxurious concoctions made from olive oil and laurel, scented with attar of roses or jasmine or amber. The attendants work the soap into thick lathers, washing hair that reaches to waists, massaging scalps, cleaning bodies that will perhaps be presented to the Sultan tonight, or tomorrow, or never again. The competition among concubines is fierce and mostly invisible. All sweetness and sisterhood on the surface, all calculations and manoeuvring beneath. Which of them will bear a son? Which will catch the Sultan's lasting affection? Which will grow old in the harem, useful but unimportant, eventually pensioned off to a minor marriage? You're sent to fetch fresh water, and when you return with your heavy copper pitcher, the concubines are being rinsed. Water pours over their heads, their bodies, running off in rivulets across the marble to the drains that carry it away to underground channels. They emerge from their rinses transformed, skin pink from heat and scrubbing, hair dark with water, looking somehow both vulnerable and powerful. The attendants wrap them in the warm towels you brought earlier, and they move to the cool room to recover, to drink sherbet, to have their hair combed and oiled, to gradually return to the normal temperature of the world outside these steamy chambers. You remain behind to begin cleaning again. The used towels must be gathered, the marble must be rinsed of soap residue, the drains must be checked for hair or any debris. The work is endless, cyclical, like the tide. Every day the hammam is used, every day it must be cleaned, every day the same tasks repeated until they become a meditation, until you can perform them with your mind elsewhere, remembering a different life in a different place, where water was precious and baths were rare and luxury was an extra blanket on a winter night. The palace is a labyrinth, but not all passages are equal. Some corridors are wide and grand, tiled with precious ceramics, lit by windows that look onto gardens where fountains play eternal songs. These are the public routes, the pathways where ambassadors might walk, where the Sultan's processions move with deliberate grandeur. Then there are the servant passages, narrow, dim, utilitarian spaces designed for efficiency rather than beauty. These you know intimately. You could navigate them blindfolded by now, measuring distance by the number of steps, by the particular echo your footfalls make in different sections, by the way air moves differently near ventilation shafts. But there are other passages, ones you've only glimpsed or heard whispered about. Secret corridors built into the palace walls, known only to the Sultan and his most trusted guards. Routes that allow him to move unseen between his quarters and the harem, between public rooms and private sanctuaries, tunnels that supposedly connect the palace to the waterfront, emergency exits designed for invasion or revolt. Historians still argue whether all the legendary secret passages actually exist, or whether some are myths that grew from the palace's genuine architectural complexity. But standing in a narrow servants' corridor, your hand on a wall that sounds hollow when tapped, you believe they're real. You're carrying a message from the harem overseer to the chief eunuch, a simple folded paper sealed with wax. You've been entrusted with this task because you're reliable, because in 3 years you've never lost a message or delivered it to the wrong person, because invisibility and reliability are your primary virtues. The route from the harem administrative office to the chief eunuch's chamber requires traversing several different zones of the palace, each with its own implicit rules about who may enter and when. You pass through the courtyard of the concubines, skirting its edges, keeping your eyes appropriately lowered. Several women are taking air under the supervision of elder attendants, sitting on cushions beneath a pergola heavy with wisteria. Their conversation drifts toward you, something about a new embroidery pattern, complaints about a merchant who delivered silk that wasn't quite the promised quality, ordinary concerns, startlingly mundane given that these women live in golden cages, their entire existence dedicated to the possibility of catching one man's attention. At the far end of the courtyard, you reach a doorway guarded by a white eunuch. He recognizes you, you've passed this way before, and waves you through without comment. You enter a transitional corridor, one of the spaces that connects the women's quarters to the administrative sections of the palace. The decoration here is notably less lavish. The walls are plain plaster, the floor simple stone rather than marble. This is the backstage of the palace where the mechanisms of power operate without ornament. You encounter another servant, an older man carrying a stack of ledgers. He nods to you in passing, and you nod back. There's a camaraderie among servants, though it's muted, careful. Trust is dangerous when anyone might inform on anyone else, when a misheard comment or a malicious rumour could end in punishment. But still, you recognise each other, acknowledge your shared condition with these small gestures. You're all furniture that breathes, all mechanisms in a vast machine none of you truly understand. A staircase spirals upward, narrow, steep, clearly not meant for anyone important. You climb, counting the steps automatically. 43. You've counted them before. There's something comforting about numbers, about repetition, about knowing that tomorrow you'll climb these same 43 steps, and the day after, and the day after that. Predictability is a form of safety. At the top, you emerge into a corridor you recognise as being near the Sultan's private library, though you've never been inside it. The door is always locked, always guarded. Supposedly it contains thousands of manuscripts, religious texts, poetry, histories, scientific treatises, collected from across the empire and beyond. You turn left, not right. Right would take you toward areas you're absolutely forbidden to enter. The Sultan's private chambers where only specifically authorized servants may go. Left leads to the administrative wing where the chief eunuch maintains his office. But even taking this permitted route, you're aware of the danger of wrong turns in the palace. There are doors you must not open, rooms you must not enter, even accidentally. The punishments for such transgressions vary. Sometimes a beating, sometimes expulsion from palace service, sometimes worse. There are stories, probably exaggerated but maybe not, of servants who wandered into forbidden zones and were never seen again. A quirky architectural feature you've noticed. Many doors in the palace are deliberately misleading. Some are false doors that open onto blank walls, built for decorative symmetry. Others are real doors that lead to small, useless spaces, dead ends, rooms with no purpose except to confuse potential intruders. It's architecture as security, a psychological warfare. If you don't know the palace intimately, you're lost. And even if you do know it well, there are always sections that remain mysterious, unknowable, deliberately obscured. You pass a window that overlooks the Bosphorus, and you pause for just a moment, a small rebellion, this pausing, this looking, this claiming a moment for yourself. The water is intensely blue today, sparkling with afternoon sun. Ships move in both directions, merchant vessels carrying goods between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, fishing boats, occasionally a war galley flying Ottoman colours. The view is extraordinary, the kind of vista that wealthy Europeans would pay fortunes to possess, and you, a servant, a nobody, a piece of human furniture, see it almost daily. Sometimes beauty feels like mockery. Sometimes it's the only thing that makes this bearable. You continue. The corridor narrows again, becomes one of those deliberately confusing sections where several passages branch off in different directions. You take the second right. You know this because you've been taught, because you've been shown multiple times until the route became automatic. A servant who gets lost reflects poorly on the entire household. Turn wrong here and you might end up in the kitchens or at a dead end, or facing a locked door with a guard asking uncomfortable questions about why you're where you shouldn't be. The chief eunuch's office is behind a door marked only by its heavy ironwork. No sign, no obvious indication of importance, but you know it by the two guards stationed on either side. They're janissaries, elite soldiers, looking simultaneously bored and alert in that way professional soldiers manage. You approach respectfully, bow, hold out the sealed message. One guard examines the seal, confirming it's legitimate, then knocks on the door in a specific pattern. A muffled voice from inside grants permission. The guard opens the door just wide enough for you to slip through, then closes it firmly behind you. The chief eunuch, Suleiman Ah, sits behind a desk piled with papers, ledgers, correspondence. He's writing something, his hand moving in the elegant calligraphy that marks an educated person. The office is surprisingly modest. A desk, several cushions for visitors, shelves of books and documents, a window with a view of a small courtyard. But the modesty is deceptive. This room is where significant power is exercised. The chief eunuch controls access to the harem, manages its finances, arbitrates disputes, reports directly to the Sultan. He's one of the most powerful people in the empire, and he's a eunuch, a slave, technically without even the basic human status of a free person. The irony would be amusing if it weren't so tragic. He glances up as you enter, takes the message without comment, breaks the seal, reads quickly. His face reveals nothing. You wait, eyes down, until he finishes and waves a hand in dismissal. Tell the overseer her request is denied. The expense is not justified. His voice is high, but not comically so, retaining authority despite its unnatural pitch. You bow again, murmur your understanding, and retreat. Back through the door, past the janissaries, into the corridor where you can finally breathe normally again. Every interaction with powerful people is a test you might fail without knowing the criteria. You survived this one. Tomorrow there will be others. The afternoon prayer call echoes across the palace as you kneel in the servants' prayer room. A small, plain chamber with whitewashed walls and simple carpets. Nothing like the magnificent mosques where the Sultan prays, but adequate for people like you. Around you, 24 other servants bow in unison, foreheads touching the ground, lips moving through the prescribed Arabic phrases. You've memorized them perfectly by now, can recite them without conscious thought, your mouth forming sounds while your mind drifts elsewhere. Is this prayer? Is this faith? Or is this simply survival wearing the costume of devotion? You were baptized Christian in a small Orthodox church in Serbia, your forehead anointed with holy oil by a priest whose name you can no longer remember. You took communion, the priest placing the bread on your tongue, telling you this was Christ's body, that you were consuming divinity itself. You believed it then with the uncomplicated faith of childhood. You crossed yourself, right to left in the Orthodox manner, kissed icons depicting saints with solemn golden faces, learned prayers in old church Slavonic that you mostly didn't understand but that sounded sacred, which seemed to be the point. Then you were taken. Separated from your family during the devshirme levy, the child tax that feeds the Ottoman system with fresh converts and loyal servants who have no ties to local populations, no competing loyalties to complicate their service. You were perhaps 13, old enough to remember everything, young enough to be moulded. The first weeks in the palace were a blur of terror and confusion, but gradually survival instincts emerged. You learned Turkish, you learned palace protocols, and you learned that open Christianity was not an option. Conversion was expected, mandatory, inevitable. Your conversion ceremony was perfunctory. A palace imam spoke the Shahada, the declaration of faith, and you repeated it. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. That's all it took. A single sentence, 20 seconds of your life, and officially you were Muslim, your Christian past erased, your new identity established. No one asked if you understood what you were saying. No one seemed to care whether belief accompanied the words. The empire runs on pragmatism, not theological purity. What matters is conformity, not conviction. But the cross you once wore is gone, and in its place is... what? You pray 5 times daily in the Muslim fashion, because not praying would mark you as suspect, as potentially rebellious, as someone who might harbour dangerous loyalties. You fast during Ramadan because everyone fasts during Ramadan and to eat would be noticed. You've learned to love the month in some ways. The shared experience of hunger, the sunset meals that taste impossibly good after a day of deprivation, the sense that everyone is enduring something together. But you also remember Christmas in your village, the priest blessing the home with incense, your mother baking special bread, the feeling that God was near and benevolent. Do you believe in Allah? Do you believe in Christ? Do you believe in both? In neither? In something else entirely that has no name? The questions exhaust you. Belief has become complicated, layered, something you can't examine too closely without feeling dizzy and lost. So you don't examine it. You bow when required, recite when required, and keep the deepest parts of yourself hidden even from yourself. Historians still argue whether forced conversions under the Ottoman system were genuine or merely superficial, whether converts truly embraced Islam or simply performed it while maintaining private Christian faith. From inside your own head, you can't answer that question. What is genuine faith? If you pray to Allah but sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, whisper Christian prayers in Serbian, are you Muslim or Christian or something in between? If you genuinely find comfort in the structured rhythm of Islamic prayer but still cross yourself when frightened, what does that make you? Around you, the other servants complete their prayers and begin to disperse. You linger a moment, ostensibly adjusting your head covering, actually just needing a few breaths alone. The prayer room empties. You're left with the silence and the whitewashed walls, and the lingering scent of bodies, and the distant sound of a fountain somewhere in the palace complex. You close your eyes and pray, not in Arabic, not in Serbian, but in your own heart's language that has no words. Please, you think, to whoever or whatever might be listening, please let me survive. Please let this life have some meaning. Please let me not disappear completely. A quirky theological detail you've learned. The palace employs multiple imams representing different schools of Islamic jurisprudence. The Hanafi school dominates. It's the official Ottoman legal school, relatively flexible in its interpretations, but there are also Shafi'i scholars, Maliki teachers, even some Hanbali traditionalists. They argue constantly about fine points of religious law, about whether certain actions are permissible or forbidden, about the proper way to conduct rituals. To an outsider it might seem chaotic, but it's actually a kind of intellectual richness. Islam isn't monolithic, isn't a single rigid structure. It contains multitudes, contradictions, ongoing conversations across centuries. This gives you some comfort. If even religious scholars can't agree on everything, if interpretation is perpetually open, then perhaps your own confused faith isn't entirely invalid. Perhaps there's room in the cosmos for someone like you, neither properly Christian nor properly Muslim, neither free nor enslaved, neither Turkish nor Serbian, but something hybrid and strange that has no name in either language. You leave the prayer room and return to your duties. The afternoon stretches ahead. Several more hours of work before the evening meal. You're assigned to help in the palace gardens today, which is relatively pleasant duty. The gardens are extensive, designed with geometric precision, filled with roses, tulips, jasmine, fruit trees, and those ever-present fountains that turn water into music. You'll be weeding, carrying water, removing dead flowers, making the beautiful stay beautiful for people who barely notice it. As you work, kneeling in soil that's been enriched with centuries of careful cultivation, you find yourself thinking about the gardens of paradise described in the Quran. Rivers of honey, trees that provide shade and fruit, beauty that never fades, peace that never ends. Is it different from the Christian heaven you learned about as a child? Angels and golden streets in the eternal presence of God? Maybe not so different. Maybe paradise is paradise regardless of the language you use to describe it. Maybe the human longing for something better, something beyond this world of pain and hierarchy and endless labour, is universal. A senior gardener approaches, an elderly man who's been tending these gardens for 40 years. His hands are gnarled from work, stained permanently with earth and plant sap. "You're doing it wrong," he says, not unkindly, and shows you the proper way to remove a weed, getting all the root, not just the visible parts, so it doesn't immediately grow back. You thank him, adjust your technique. This is its own form of prayer, you think. This attention to small tasks, this attempt to do even simple things correctly, to bring care to a world that rarely shows care to you. The afternoon light slants golden through the trees. Somewhere a bird is singing. You don't know what kind of bird. You were never taught bird names, but the song is lovely and doesn't require identification to be appreciated. For just a moment, you feel something like peace. It won't last. Peace never does in the palace. But for this moment, kneeling in garden soil, hands dirty, sun warm on your back, you exist without terror, without calculation, without the constant vigilance that usually defines your days. You pull weeds, the bird sings, the fountain trickles, the world continues indifferent to your confusion, indifferent to your small survival. And somehow, that indifference is almost comforting. The laundry complex occupies an entire wing of the servants' quarters, a series of interconnected rooms that perpetually smell of lye soap, wet fabric, and wood smoke from the fires that heat enormous copper cauldrons. You enter carrying a basket piled with linens from the harem, bed sheets that need washing, towels used in the hammam, delicate silk undergarments that require special handling. The basket is almost as large as you are, and by the time you reach the laundry, your arms ache from carrying it down 3 flights of stairs and across 2 courtyards. You set it down with relief near the sorting station, where an older woman named Fatma, not the princess but a servant who shares her name, immediately begins examining the contents with the practiced eye of someone who's washed palace laundry for 25 years. "Silk here, cotton here, linen here," she mutters, separating items into different piles with quick, efficient movements. "This," she holds up a delicate chemise, "this goes to the special tubs, hand wash only. If you put this in the hot water with the sheets, you'll ruin it, and then you'll be explaining to the harem overseer why one of the concubines has nothing to wear, and that's a conversation I promise you don't want to have." She drops the chemise into a basket designated for delicate items and continues sorting. The laundry hierarchy is its own complex system. At the bottom are the haulers like you, who carry dirty items to the laundry and clean items back. Then come the washers who actually clean the clothes, standing for hours over tubs of hot water, scrubbing fabric against corrugated boards, wringing out excess water with strong hands. Above them are the specialists who handle the delicate items, who understand which fabrics can tolerate which treatments, who know that silk from China requires different care than silk from Bursa. At the top are the ironers and folders, who transform clean laundry into presentable items, using heated irons to press out wrinkles, folding everything according to specific protocols. You're assigned to the washing station today, which means hours of hot, wet, monotonous labour. You join 5 other servants at a row of enormous wooden tubs filled with steaming water, heated by fires underneath. The water's been mixed with soap made from olive oil and ash, creating a slippery, slightly caustic solution that will strip dirt from fabric, but also slowly strip the skin from your hands if you're not careful. Everyone's hands in the laundry are red and rough, permanently chapped, sometimes cracked and bleeding despite the oil you rub into them at night. You plunge a sheet into your tub, cotton, heavy even when dry, impossibly heavy when wet. The hot water immediately soaks through your sleeves. You begin the process. Submerge the fabric completely, agitate it to loosen dirt, lift sections and scrub them against the corrugated wooden board mounted on the tub's edge. Plunge it back in, repeat. The sheet is from one of the harem beds, and you can see the dirt coming out of it in cloudy streams, body oil, sweat, the invisible residue of human existence. People think royalty must be cleaner than ordinary folk, but bodies are bodies. Everyone sweats, sheds skin, leaves marks on fabric. The rhythm of washing is hypnotic once you surrender to it. Lift, scrub, plunge, lift, scrub, plunge. Your arms develop a mechanical quality, repeating the same motions hundreds of times. Around you, other washers are doing the same, creating a symphony of splashing water, the scrape of fabric on wood, the occasional muttered curse when someone's hands slip, or when particularly stubborn dirt won't release. Steam rises from the tubs, condensing on the ceiling and walls, dripping back down in a constant cycle. The room is perpetually damp, perpetually warm, perpetually smelling of that distinctive combination of soap and wet fabric and human effort. Historians still argue whether Ottoman laundry techniques were more advanced than contemporary European methods, but standing here with your arms submerged in hot water, the question seems absurd. Laundry is laundry. It's always been hard labour, always been assigned to people with no choice in the matter, always been one of those essential but invisible tasks that keep society functioning. The palace generates hundreds of pounds of dirty laundry every single day. All of it must be cleaned. All of it must be returned to its proper place. The system never stops. A quirky detail about palace laundry. Different types of stains require different treatments. Blood, which appears more often than you'd expect from menstruation, from minor injuries, occasionally from more sinister sources, must be soaked in cold water first. Hot water will set blood stains permanently. Grease stains need to be treated with fuller's earth or chalk dust before washing. Ink requires lemon juice or vinegar. Wine stains respond to salt. The senior washers carry this knowledge like precious secrets, accumulated over years of trial and error, passed down from one generation of laundry workers to the next. You finish your first sheet and wring it out. This requires all your strength, twisting the heavy wet fabric into a rope, forcing out as much water as possible before it goes to the drying lines. Water streams onto the floor, which is deliberately sloped to drain away toward channels that carry it outside. You add the wrung sheet to a basket and grab another from the pile of dirty linens, and another, and another. Your count has lost meaning. You've washed 6 sheets, or maybe 7, or maybe it's been a dozen. Time becomes strange in the laundry, measured not in minutes but in completed tasks. The heat is oppressive. Sweat runs down your back, soaks into your already damp clothing. You're essentially working in a steam bath, and while your skin appreciates the moisture, your hands aside, your body is exhausted by the constant heat. One of the other washers, a girl about your age named Zara, suddenly sways and nearly faints. 2 others grab her, guide her to a bench near the doorway where cooler air penetrates slightly. Someone brings her water. She drinks, recovers, insists she's fine, tries to return to work. The supervising laundress, A formidable woman named Aishi, who seems to be made of leather and iron, orders her to rest for 10 minutes. "This happens," the woman next to you mutters. "The heat gets everyone eventually. Last summer 3 girls collapsed in one day. They brought in replacements from the general servants' pool, but they weren't any tougher. Heat is heat. Bodies are bodies. You nod agreement, but save your breath for work. Talking while washing is permitted but not encouraged. It suggests you're not working hard enough. You pull another sheet from the pile, notice it's stained with something dark in one corner. Wine, probably, or perhaps pomegranate juice. You scrub the stain particularly hard, watching it gradually fade, lighten, finally disappear. There's satisfaction in this, in taking something dirty and making it clean, in producing visible results from your labour. So much of palace work is invisible. You arrange things that will be immediately disarranged, serve food that will be immediately consumed, clean rooms that will be immediately dirtied. But a clean sheet is a clean sheet, evidence of work completed, of value added to the world. By the time you finish your assigned portion, 15 large sheets, a dozen towels and various smaller items, your arms feel like they might detach from your shoulders. Your hands are wrinkled and pale from the water, and despite the hot temperature, you're actually shivering slightly, your body confused by being simultaneously overheated and perpetually wet. You add your final items to the basket for the drying crew, who will carry everything to the massive open-air drying courts where laundry is spread on bushes or hung on lines, bleaching in the sun. The next phase is folding and organising dried laundry from yesterday, preparing it for return to its various destinations. This is quieter work, less physically demanding but requiring more attention to detail. Each household within the palace, the Sultan's quarters, the harem, the prince's chambers, the various administrative offices, has specific linens, and mixing them up is a serious offence. You fold sheets into precise rectangles, matching corners perfectly, smoothing out any wrinkles. The fabric is sun-warm, smells of fresh air and sunshine, feels clean in a way that's almost sacred. This is the good part of laundry work, handling the finished product, seeing the results of all that hard labour. The summons comes just as you're finishing your laundry duties. A sharp-faced eunuch appears in the doorway, scans the room, and points directly at you. You, the Valide Sultan, requires attendance, immediately. Your stomach drops. The Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, is the most powerful woman in the entire Ottoman Empire, more influential than any concubine, more feared than most viziers. She controls the harem absolutely, has the Sultan's ear, can make or break careers, lives, destinies with a word. You've seen her from a distance perhaps a dozen times in 3 years, but you've never been summoned to serve her directly. This is either an extraordinary opportunity or a prelude to disaster, and you have no way of knowing which. You follow the eunuch through corridors you barely register, your mind racing through possible reasons for this summons. Have you done something wrong? Offended someone without knowing it? Or is this simply random assignment, your name pulled from a list of available servants? The eunuch offers no explanation, his face revealing nothing as he leads you through increasingly grand passages, from the servants' areas into the heart of the harem itself, to chambers you've never entered before. He stops before an ornate door inlaid with mother-of-pearl and gestures for you to wait. He disappears inside, leaving you standing in the corridor, trying to control your breathing, trying to remember everything you've ever heard about proper protocol in the Valide Sultan's presence. Keep your eyes down, speak only when spoken to, move slowly, deliberately, never suddenly. Show absolute deference without appearing obsequious. It's a narrow path between too much and too little, and getting it wrong could have consequences you don't want to imagine. The door opens, the eunuch beckons. You enter a chamber that takes your breath away. It's not large, but every surface is decorated with exquisite taste. The walls are covered in Iznik tiles depicting garden scenes with flowers so realistic you almost expect to smell them. The ceiling is painted with geometric patterns in gold and lapis lazuli. Silk cushions are arranged around a low table of carved walnut inlaid with ivory. Latticed windows filter afternoon light into soft, golden shadows. And in the centre of this jewel box room sits the Valide Sultan herself. She's perhaps 50 years old, though age is difficult to determine with someone whose face has been protected from sun and hardship her entire adult life. She was once a concubine herself. This story is well known throughout the palace. Captured in a raid on a Venetian-held island, brought to the harem as a teenager, beautiful enough to catch the previous sultan's attention, clever enough to keep it, fortunate enough to bear a son who survived childhood and eventually took the throne. That makes her technically a slave who became the mother of emperors. The irony of the Ottoman system distilled into one person. She's dressed in magnificent simplicity. A kaftan of deep purple silk with minimal embroidery, the luxury evident in the quality of the fabric rather than ornamentation. Her head is covered with a silk scarf, and her only jewellery is a single enormous emerald on her right hand, a stone so large and perfect it probably cost more than a small province generates in annual taxes. Her face is calm, her dark eyes intelligent and assessing. She looks at you the way a jeweller might examine a stone, determining value, searching for flaws. "You're the Serbian girl," she says. Not a question. Somehow she knows your origin despite the Turkish name you've been given, despite 3 years of trying to erase your past. Your heart hammers. "Yes, my lady," you manage, bowing deeply. "You've been here 3 years. Your supervisors report you're competent, reliable, and appropriately invisible." She speaks Turkish with a slight accent, Venetian Italian occasionally surfacing in her pronunciation. "I'm told you can be trusted with discretion." "Yes, my lady." What else can you say? Disagreement isn't an option. Good. I have a task that requires someone with no ambitions, no family connections within the palace, and no reason to carry tales. You fit these requirements. She gestures to a writing desk in the corner. "I've been corresponding with someone outside the palace. These letters," she indicates a small stack of folded papers sealed with plain wax, "need to be delivered to a contact in the city. Not through official channels. Quietly. Do you understand? You understand that you're being asked to participate in something secret, possibly dangerous, definitely outside normal palace protocols. You understand that refusing isn't really an option when the Valide Sultan makes a request. You understand that knowledge of this task makes you valuable or vulnerable, depending on how events unfold." "I understand, my lady." Historians still argue whether the Valide Sultan's political power was official or merely influential, whether her role was institutionalized or dependent on personal relationships. But standing before her now, such academic distinctions seem meaningless. Power is power. It doesn't matter whether it flows through formal channels or informal networks, when it can still destroy you or elevate you with equal ease. She stands, moving to the window, looking out at a garden you can't see from your position. "The messages concern my grandson's education. Nothing treasonous, nothing that threatens the Sultan's rule. But there are certain political factions who would misinterpret my involvement if they learned of it. Therefore discretion. She turns back to you, her face serious. If you're caught delivering these letters, I will deny all knowledge. You'll be on your own. Do you still agree to this task? The question is rhetorical. You both know you have no real choice, but she's offering you the pretense of choice, the illusion of agency, and that's more than most powerful people bother with. I agree, my lady. She returns to her cushions, picks up the letters, and hands them to you. They're surprisingly heavy. Thick paper, expensive, the kind used for important correspondence. There's a carpet merchant near the Spice Bazaar. His shop is called the House of Persian Treasures. Give these to him. Tell him they're from a friend in the garden, and he'll understand. Go this afternoon during the busy hours when you're less likely to be noticed. Take no one with you. Tell no one where you're going. You tuck the letters inside your tunic, against your skin where they'll be hidden and secure. Yes, my lady. One more thing. Her voice stops you as you're beginning to bow your way toward the door. If you complete this task successfully and maintain appropriate silence about it, you'll find your circumstances here improve. Better quarters, perhaps. Less exhausting duties. Even eventually the possibility of manumission. She lets that last word hang in the air. Manumission, freedom, the distant dream every slave carries but few achieve. I reward loyalty. I also punish betrayal with absolute ruthlessness. Which will you earn? Loyalty, my lady. Always loyalty. The words come automatically, but you mean them. Or at least you mean them as much as anyone in your position can mean anything when speaking to absolute power. She waves a hand in dismissal. The eunuch appears to escort you out. You back toward the door, maintaining eye contact until the last possible moment as protocol demands. Then you're in the corridor, and the door closes behind you with a soft final sound. The eunuch says nothing, merely leads you back through the maze of passages to the servants' areas, and leaves you there without a word of instruction or advice. You lean against a wall, feeling the letters pressing against your skin, feeling the weight of dangerous knowledge, feeling suddenly visible in a way you've spent 3 years trying to avoid. The Valide Sultan has noticed you. You're no longer anonymous furniture. You're a tool she's chosen to use, and tools get maintained as long as they're useful and discarded when they break or become unnecessary. You've been given an opportunity that could change your life, wrapped around a risk that could end it. Welcome to palace politics. You're no longer at the bottom of the hierarchy. You're not sure that's an improvement. The afternoon sun hangs heavy as you make your way to the afternoon entertainment preparations. The Valide Sultan's letters still pressed against your skin like a secret heartbeat. But first, there's the scheduled work. The palace runs on routines, and deviation from those routines draws attention you cannot afford. You arrive at the harem's entertainment salon, a spacious chamber with walls painted in soft pastels, cushions arranged in careful clusters, and a small raised platform where performers will present their arts. Several other servants are already at work preparing the space for the daily diversion that keeps the harem's women from descending into complete boredom-induced madness. Boredom is perhaps the harem's greatest enemy, more insidious than disease, more destructive than jealousy. These women, concubines, servants, royal daughters, the Valide Sultan herself, live in luxurious imprisonment. They cannot leave the palace grounds without elaborate permissions and heavy escort. They cannot mix freely with men outside their immediate family. Their lives are circumscribed by walls, by protocol, by the iron requirements of propriety and security. So entertainment becomes essential, a pressure valve that releases tension before it explodes into something dangerous. You help arrange the cushions in a semicircle, facing the performance platform. Each cushion must be positioned precisely. The highest-ranking women will sit in the front centre. Lesser concubines arrayed the sides and back, servants standing behind everyone. The hierarchy of seating is absolute and unforgiving. Place a cushion wrong, and you've made a political statement, possibly insulted someone, definitely created a problem. You measure distances with your eyes, adjust positions by fractions of an inch, seeking the perfect arrangement that will offend no one. Another servant, you recognize her as Gül, a girl about your age who works primarily in the concubines' quarters, arrives carrying a wooden case containing musical instruments. She sets it down carefully near the platform and begins unpacking. An oud with its pear-shaped body and bent neck, a knee flute made from hollow reed, a small drum called a darbuka, and finger cymbals that will provide rhythmic punctuation. The instruments are beautiful objects in themselves. The oud inlaid with mother-of-pearl in floral patterns, the drum painted with geometric designs in red and gold. "Are you playing today?" you ask Gül quietly. She has musical talent, you know, occasionally performs for small gatherings when the regular musicians are unavailable. She shakes her head. "The professional musicians are coming today. Someone special requested them. Harem, I think. She's been trying to improve her status, wants to demonstrate her sophisticated tastes." Gül's voice carries a note of cynicism. The competition among concubines is endless, conducted through subtle demonstrations of culture, wit, beauty, fertility. Entertainment choices are another battlefield in wars most people outside the harem never see. The musicians arrive shortly after. 3 men, all middle-aged, all carrying themselves with the dignity of artists who know their worth. They're eunuchs, of course, as they must be to enter the harem. But they're respected eunuchs, valued for their skills rather than merely tolerated for their usefulness. The lead musician nods to you and Gül, acknowledging your presence with casual courtesy that surprises you. In your experience, specialists usually ignore servants completely. Perhaps artists are different, or perhaps these particular men remember when they themselves were lower in the hierarchy. They begin tuning their instruments, and even this preliminary noise is beautiful. The oud strings produce rich, complex tones as the musician adjusts tension, seeking perfect pitch. The ney player tests his flute with breathy experimental notes that sound like wind through ruins, haunting and somehow lonely. The drummer taps his darbuka, adjusting the skin's tightness, producing sharp sounds that echo off the painted walls. While they tune, you move to the back of the room where refreshments are being prepared. Entertainment sessions always include food and drink. Not full meals, but delicate presentations of sweets, fruits and sherbets. Today's offerings are impressive. A silver tray loaded with baklava, the filo pastry impossibly thin, layered with pistachios and soaked in honey. Another tray holds Turkish delight in various colours, rose, lemon and orange, each piece dusted with powdered sugar. Fresh fruits are arranged artistically, figs sliced to reveal their pink interiors, pomegranates broken open to display ruby seeds, grapes in purple and green clusters. The sherbets are in crystal glasses, catching the light and throwing rainbow fragments across nearby surfaces. These aren't simple drinks, but elaborate concoctions. One is made from roses, another from violets, a third from pomegranates sweetened with sugar and chilled in the underground ice houses that preserve winter ice through the brutal Istanbul summers. You're responsible for ensuring the glasses don't empty during the performance, circulating with pitchers to refill them discreetly, invisibly, like a helpful ghost. The women begin arriving, and the room's atmosphere shifts immediately. Concubines enter in small groups, chattering among themselves, dressed in their finest afternoon attire, silk kaftans in jewel tones, hair elaborately arranged, jewellery sparkling at throats and wrists and fingers. They arrange themselves on the cushions with careful attention to hierarchy, older concubines and those who've borne children taking precedence, newer additions and childless women accepting less prominent positions without visible complaint. Though you can see the tightness around some mouths, the flash of resentment quickly suppressed. Princess Fatma and Princess Selim arrive with their personal attendants. Fatma looks slightly less irritable than this morning. Perhaps her afternoon has improved, or perhaps the prospect of entertainment has lifted her mood. Selim bounces to her cushion with characteristic energy, immediately demanding sherbet, examining the sweets with obvious interest. "Can I have the orange Turkish delight? The orange is my favourite. Why is orange better than the other flavours? Do oranges grow in the palace gardens? Can I see the gardens later?" Her attendant answers patiently while you pour sherbet, the pink liquid streaming from pitcher to glass, releasing its floral scent. You place the glass on a small table beside Selim's cushion and withdraw before she can engage you in conversation. Engaging with royalty is dangerous. Say too little and seem sullen, say too much and seem presumptuous, and you never know which response any given person expects. Historians still argue whether harem women were prisoners or privileged, whether their limitations were oppressive or protective, but watching them settle into their cushions, preparing to be entertained like children at a puppet show, you think perhaps the question misses the point. They're simultaneously imprisoned and privileged, oppressed and protected, powerful within their sphere and utterly powerless beyond it. Contradiction defines the harem. Nothing here is simple, nothing is only one thing. The Valid Sultan enters last and everyone stands immediately, bowing until she's seated in the central position of honour. She acknowledges the room with a slight nod, then gestures for everyone to sit. Her entrance transforms the gathering from casual to formal, from entertainment to ceremony. Everything that happens now happens under her observation, subject to her judgment. You remember the letters pressed against your skin and fight the urge to touch them, to confirm they're still hidden. The Valid Sultan's eyes sweep the room and pass over you without recognition. Good. You're furniture again, invisible and safe. The musicians begin. The oud player's fingers dance across strings, producing a melody that seems to unfold like a flower opening, each note revealing new layers of complexity. The ney player joins, his flute weaving around the ode's melody like wind around branches. The drummer adds rhythm, subtle at first, just a heartbeat underneath the melodic instruments, gradually becoming more prominent, more insistent. The music is neither sad nor happy, but something in between, something that speaks to longing and memory and the bittersweet nature of beauty that cannot last. You stand against the wall, holding your pitcher of sherbet, watching the audience respond to the music. Some women close their eyes, lost in private worlds the melody unlocks. Others watch the musicians with rapt attention, following their hands, studying their technique. A few, the very young or the very bored, fidget despite the music's beauty, more interested in the sweets or in whispering to neighbours. The Valide Sultan sits motionless, her face revealing nothing, but you sense she's listening deeply, that the music reaches something in her that daily palace life keeps sealed away. The performance continues for perhaps an hour, multiple pieces, some fast and rhythmic, others slow and contemplative. Between pieces the women applaud politely, sip their sherbets, nibble at sweets. You circulate with your pitcher, refilling glasses, clearing empty dessert plates, always moving, always working, always present, but unacknowledged. This is your role. This is what you do. And later, when the entertainment ends and afternoon shifts to evening, you'll have to somehow slip away to the city with letters pressed against your heart, carrying secrets that could elevate or destroy you. The entertainment ends with a final flourish of music, and as the women disperse to their various chambers, chattering about the performance, you slip away through a servant's corridor with practiced invisibility. The letters against your skin seem to pulse with every heartbeat, reminding you of the dangerous errand ahead. You have perhaps 2 hours before you're expected at evening duties, enough time to reach the spice bazaar, find the carpet merchant, deliver the letters, and return. Enough time if nothing goes wrong. But things often go wrong in the palace, and servants who disappear without permission face questions you'd rather not answer. You exit through one of the lesser gates, nodding to the guard who recognizes you from previous errands. Palace servants are occasionally sent into the city for various tasks, purchasing special items, delivering messages, accompanying higher-ranking servants on shopping expeditions. Your face is familiar enough that the guard waves you through without interrogation, and suddenly you're outside the palace walls standing on a dusty street in Istanbul, the city spreading before you in all its chaotic glory. The contrast always shocks you. The palace's controlled order versus the city's exuberant disorder. Here, merchants shout their wares from storefronts and carts. Children run through narrow streets, playing games that involve much shrieking and laughter. Dogs wander freely, searching for scraps. Donkeys laden with goods navigate impossible traffic, their handlers cursing creatively. The smell is overwhelming after the palace's perfumed spaces, roasted meat, spices, human bodies, animal waste, wood smoke, seawater from the nearby Bosphorus, all combining into an olfactory assault that's somehow more alive than anything behind palace walls. You walk quickly, but not too quickly, through streets that climb and descend Istanbul's famous 7 hills. The city is ancient, layered with history. Byzantine ruins peek from between Ottoman structures, old churches converted to mosques, walls that witnessed Roman emperors now witnessing Ottoman merchants. The architecture is a palimpsest, each generation writing over the last but never quite erasing what came before. You navigate by memory and by asking occasional directions, heading toward the Spice Bazaar, that covered market near the Golden Horn where the air itself seems tinged with cinnamon and cardamom and 100 other aromatics. The bazaar is chaos organized by ancient mercantile logic. Shops cluster by specialty. All the spice vendors in one section, fabric merchants in another, jewelers gathered together, coppersmiths creating their ringing symphony of hammered metal. You push through crowds of shoppers, wealthy women attended by servants, foreign merchants negotiating in fractured Turkish, supplemented by gestures, local housewives haggling over prices with theatrical outrage. Everyone is here to buy or sell or simply to see and be seen, to participate in the commerce that makes Istanbul the crossroads between East and West, between Europe and Asia, between Christian lands and Muslim territories. You find the carpet merchant shop tucked into a corner near where spice vendors transition to textile sellers. The sign above the door reads, "House of Persian Treasures," in flowing Arabic script decorated with painted flowers. The shop's entrance displays rolled carpets standing upright like colourful columns, their patterns ranging from geometric precision to floral exuberance. You hesitate at the threshold, suddenly aware of how dangerous this moment is. You're delivering secret letters for the Valid Sultan to someone whose identity and motivations you don't understand. This could be innocent. This could be treason. You have no way of knowing, and ignorance won't protect you if things go wrong. But turning back is impossible. The valid Sultan doesn't make requests that can be declined. You step inside. The shop's interior is dim after the bright street, your eyes requiring a moment to adjust. Carpets are everywhere, stacked on shelves, hanging from walls, spread across the floor, creating layers of wool and silk in reds and blues and golds. The merchant appears from behind a curtain at the back, a man perhaps 60 years old, grey-bearded, wearing a simple robe that nonetheless suggests prosperity. His eyes are sharp, assessing, missing nothing as they examine you from head to foot. "I'm looking for carpets," you say, using the innocuous phrase anyone might use entering such a shop. "I have many carpets," he replies, his voice neutral. "What type interests you?" "Something from a friend in the garden," you say, delivering the code phrase exactly as instructed. His expression doesn't change, but something shifts in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. "Ah, yes, gardens produce many beautiful things. Come." He gestures toward the back of the shop, behind the curtain from which he emerged. You follow him into a small office cluttered with account books, samples of fabric and cups of tea in various states of being consumed. He closes the curtain behind you, creating privacy, then turns to face you expectantly. You remove the letters from inside your tunic, hand them over. He takes them without comment, breaks the seals, and reads quickly. His face reveals nothing. Years of merchanting have trained him to perfect inscrutability. "Tell your mistress," he says finally, carefully not naming the Valid Sultan directly, that the matter she inquires about proceeds as hoped. The teacher she recommended has been engaged. Lessons will begin next month. All is arranged. He produces a small sealed letter from inside his own robes. "Give her this. It contains details she requested." You take the letter. Tuck it away against your skin where the Valide Sultan's letters recently rested. The merchant studies you for a long moment. "You're young for this work," he observes. "Young and frightened, which is wise. Fear keeps people careful. But remember, we're all servants of larger forces, whether we serve in palaces or shops. The game is old, and we're just the current players. Don't take it personally when you're used, and don't feel guilty when you survive. Survival is enough." Historians still argue whether the Valide Sultan's influence extended into the city through networks of merchants and informants, or whether such networks are romanticized inventions of later writers. But standing in this carpet shop, receiving cryptic advice from a merchant who somehow knows your palace staff, you understand that the argument is settled. Of course she has networks. Power without information is just ceremony. The Valide Sultan didn't become the empire's most influential woman by staying ignorant of events beyond palace walls. You bow slightly to the merchant, a gesture of respect between people engaged in the same dangerous service, and leave the shop. Back into the bazaar's chaos, back through crowds that have grown denser as afternoon shoppers arrive. You pause at a spice vendor, pretending interest in saffron while actually checking whether anyone followed you from the carpet shop. You see no one obviously watching, no one who seems interested in your movements. Good. You purchase a small packet of cinnamon. You need a plausible reason for leaving the palace, and continue your return journey. The walk back feels longer than the walk out, weighted by the letter you carry, by the knowledge of what you've done. You've become part of palace intrigue now, no longer merely a servant, but an instrument of power's invisible extensions. This is dangerous territory. People who know too much become liabilities. People who carry messages sometimes disappear when those messages become inconvenient. But you've also been promised rewards, better quarters, easier work, eventual freedom. The gamble is simple. Use your vulnerability carefully enough, long enough, and maybe you survive to see those rewards. Or maybe you become a casualty of games you barely comprehend. You reach the palace gate just as the afternoon call to prayer echoes across the city. Perfect timing. Returning during prayer creates useful confusion. People distracted by their devotions, guards less attentive. You show your cinnamon to the guard as explanation for your absence. He nods, waves you through. You're back inside the walls, back in the ordered world where every stone has been placed with purpose, where fountains play their eternal songs, where power wraps itself in beauty and calls the result civilization. Evening descends on the palace like a silk curtain, transforming the light from gold to amber to purple, and with that transformation comes the evening feast preparation, the most elaborate meal service of the day, requiring coordination among hundreds of servants across multiple kitchens and dining chambers. You report to the main staging area, a large room adjacent to the kitchens where prepared dishes are assembled onto trays for transport to their various destinations. The merchant's letter still rests against your skin, undelivered. The valid Sultan will have to wait until you can find a discreet moment to return it, and such moments are rare during the chaos of dinner service. The staging area buzzes with controlled urgency. Senior servants bark instructions, checking lists, ensuring every dish meets exacting standards before it leaves their supervision. You're assigned to the harem dining service tonight, which means carrying trays through torchlit corridors to the communal dining chamber, where concubines and palace women take their evening meal. The Sultan dines separately, of course, in his private quarters with whichever concubine he's favouring tonight, or alone if he prefers solitude. The royal children dine in their own chambers, attended by specialised servants. But the harem's general population, perhaps 40 women tonight, eats together in a hall designed for such gatherings. Your first tray contains mezze, small dishes meant to begin the meal, stimulate the appetite, provide variety and colour. There are plates of hummus garnished with olive oil and paprika, baba ganoush topped with pomegranate seeds, stuffed grape leaves glistening with lemon juice, white cheese mixed with herbs, olives in 3 colours, and fresh bread still warm from the ovens. The tray is heavy, loaded with perhaps a dozen small plates, each one a work of culinary art despite being merely a preliminary course. You lift the tray carefully, balancing its weight, and join the procession of servants heading toward the harem dining hall. The route takes you through passages you know well by now, past familiar landmarks. The fountain with the chipped tile that no one has repaired in 3 years, the window overlooking the garden where jasmine blooms fill night air with impossible sweetness, the turn where the corridor narrows and you must navigate carefully to avoid scraping the tray against walls. The dining hall glows with lamplight when you enter. Hanging lamps of pierced brass cast intricate shadow patterns across walls and ceiling, their candlelight flickering with every air current. The women are already seated on cushions around low tables arranged in a large U-shape, allowing servants to circulate in the centre, delivering and removing courses. Conversation fills the space. Laughter, gossip, occasional sharp words when someone takes offence at something said. The atmosphere is simultaneously relaxed and tense, women enjoying the meal while navigating the complex social dynamics that govern every harem interaction. You place your mezze dishes on the appropriate tables, distributing them according to a pattern you've memorized. Certain dishes for certain positions, nothing random, everything prescribed by tradition and hierarchy. The women barely acknowledge your presence, too absorbed in their conversations and in examining the food. You hear fragments as you work. And then she had the audacity to suggest my embroidery was uneven. I heard he requested her 3 nights in a row, which means the astrologer predicted an auspicious time for conception, so naturally she's insufferable. Back to the staging area for the next course. This time it's soup. A lentil soup enriched with butter and lemon, served in individual bowls with a swirl of yogurt on top and a sprinkle of dried mint. The kitchen has prepared enough for 50 people. The 40 women plus servants and any unexpected guests. You load a tray with 8 bowls, their contents steaming gently, and return to the dining hall. The soup service requires more care than the mezzi. Hot liquid sloshes dangerously if you walk too quickly or navigate a corner too sharply. You've seen servants spill soup, seen the humiliation on their faces as they're berated for clumsiness, seen them scrubbing floors while others serve. You will not be one of them. You move with deliberate grace, each step measured, each turn calculated. As you place soup bowls, you notice Harem, the concubine with the red gold hair who received the Sultan's bracelet, holding court at one of the better tables. She's describing something using elaborate hand gestures, her voice carrying over the general conversation. And the ambassador actually believed that camels could run faster than horses over long distances. Can you imagine? I had to explain very gently that perhaps his information was outdated. The women around her laugh appreciatively. Harem has wit, a dangerous asset in the harem where intelligence can be threat or tool depending on how it's wielded. The courses continue. After soup comes a procession of main dishes: roasted lamb seasoned with cumin and coriander, chicken cooked in a stew with apricots and almonds, fish from the Bosphorus grilled simply with lemon and herbs, rice pilaf studded with currants and pine nuts, vegetables prepared in various styles, eggplant fried and served with yogurt sauce, green beans sautéed with tomatoes and garlic, stuffed peppers gleaming with olive oil. Each dish appears on your tray or someone else's, is carried through corridors, placed on tables, admired and consumed. You make perhaps 20 trips between the staging area and the dining hall over the course of 2 hours. Your legs ache, your arms tremble from repeated lifting, your back protests the constant bending to place dishes and remove emptied plates. Around you, other servants are engaged in the same repetitive labour, all of you moving in synchronized patterns like dancers in some exhausting ballet. No one complains. Complaining is pointless. This is the work. This is your life. You endure it because you have no choice, and because endurance is its own quiet form of resistance. Historians still argue whether Ottoman palace feasts were more elaborate than contemporary European royal banquets, but from your position as someone who has to carry the results through corridors, the question seems absurd. Elaborate is elaborate. This feast would feed your entire village for a week, maybe longer. The waste alone, the portions left uneaten, the dishes barely sampled, would represent wealth beyond imagination to the people you grew up with. But here, abundance is expected, waste is acceptable, because the empire can afford it. Or at least the empire acts as though it can afford it, which amounts to the same thing as long as everyone believes the performance. A quirky detail about palace dining. The Sultan's food tasters aren't just for the Sultan. Every high-ranking person in the palace, the valid Sultan, the princes, even some of the more important concubines, has food tested before consumption. Not because poison is common, but because the possibility of poison must be acknowledged. The empire runs on paranoia as much as power. Trust is dangerous. Verification is wise. So food tasters sample everything, risking their lives every meal. Their survival a form of quality control. It's a system that makes a dark kind of sense. Though you're profoundly grateful you're a carrier of food rather than a tester of it. The final course is desserts, and the kitchen has outdone itself. There's baklava, of course. That's mandatory for any significant meal. But also kunefe made from shredded phyllo and cheese, soaked in sugar syrup. There are bowls of muhallebi, a milk pudding delicate as air, flavoured with rose water and topped with crushed pistachios. There's fresh fruit, figs and grapes and pomegranates, arranged artfully on silver platters. And there's Turkish coffee, thick and sweet and strong, served in tiny cups accompanied by lokum, Turkish delight in various flavours. You carry the final trays, place the final dishes, witness the women's pleasure as they sample sweets and sip coffee. Some will retire to their chambers after this. Others will linger, talking late into the night, reluctant to return to rooms that feel like elegant prisons despite their silk cushions and painted walls. You gather empty dishes, stack them onto trays, begin the reverse journey back to the kitchens where other servants will wash everything, preparing for tomorrow's identical cycle. As you're making what you hope is your final trip, you pass near the Valide Sultan's chambers. A eunuch intercepts you, the same sharp-faced man who summoned you earlier. The Valide Sultan requires a moment, he says quietly. You follow him, grateful this is finally happening, that you can deliver the merchant's letter and be free of its dangerous weight. She receives you quickly, alone in a small antechamber. You hand over the letter without speaking. She breaks the seal, reads, nods once. Well done. Your discretion is noted and appreciated. You may go. That's all. No elaboration, no thanks, no indication of what the letter contained or why it mattered. You bow and leave, lighter by one letter, heavier by the knowledge that you've proven useful and will likely be used again. The evening deepens toward night, and you find yourself stationed in one of the outer corridors of the harem, not quite dismissed to sleep, but not actively engaged in labour either. You're in that liminal state of palace service where you're waiting, available, ready to be summoned for any need that might arise. Several other servants share this in-between space with you, sitting on benches built into the corridor walls, speaking in low voices or simply existing in tired silence. This is when palace secrets emerge, when gossip flows like water through the elaborate fountains, when servants who have witnessed fragments of larger stories piece together narratives from incomplete evidence. You're trying not to think about the Sultan's night rituals happening somewhere in the deeper recesses of the palace, but the other servants inevitably gravitate toward the topic. It's simultaneously forbidden and irresistible. Everyone knows the general outline of what happens when the Sultan chooses a concubine for the night, but the specific details are shrouded in layers of secrecy, protocol, and deliberate mystification. Still, servants talk. Secrets in the palace are like water. You can build elaborate structures to contain them, but they always find cracks, always seep through, always flow to lower ground. I heard he chose harem again tonight, murmurs Aishi, a girl who works in the concubine's quarters and would know such things. That's 4 times this month. The others are starting to worry. 4 times means nothing, counters an older servant named Layla, her voice carrying the authority of experience. I've been here 12 years. I've seen favourites rise and fall like tides. Frequency of summons doesn't guarantee status. Only pregnancy matters. Only sons. Another servant, a boy perhaps 14, asks with the innocent curiosity of youth, what actually happens? I mean, do they just... or is there ceremony? How does it work? He immediately looks embarrassed for asking, but everyone wants to know. The Sultan's intimate life is the empire's greatest mystery and greatest source of speculation. Layla considers the question, decides it's innocent enough to answer. There's ritual, she says finally. The concubine is bathed, perfumed, dressed in the finest garments. Her hair is arranged perfectly. She's inspected by the senior harem women to ensure she's properly prepared. Then she's escorted to the Sultan's chambers by the chief eunuch. What happens inside those chambers? She shrugs. Only those present know, and they're bound by oaths of silence more binding than marriage vows. But they do talk, Aishi insists. The concubines talk to each other. They compare experiences. What they compare is aftermath, not details, Layla corrects. They talk about whether he was pleased, whether they think they might have conceived, whether he gave gifts or made promises. But the actual acts, she shakes her head. That remains private, or private enough. You hear rumours that he prefers certain things, that he's gentle or demanding or peculiar in his tastes, but rumours aren't knowledge. They're just gossip wearing knowledge as clothing. Historians still argue whether the elaborate protocols around the Sultan's intimate life served practical purposes, preventing disease, ensuring legitimate heirs, maintaining order among competing women, or whether they were primarily theatrical, creating mystique around the imperial person, transforming basic human functions into sacred mysteries. From your position in this corridor, listening to servants speculate, you think perhaps the protocols serve both functions simultaneously, that practical concerns and theatrical presentation aren't contradictory, but complementary. The boy persists, emboldened by Layla's willingness to discuss the topic. But what about consent? I mean, can the concubines refuse if they don't want to? Refuse the Sultan? Layla's laugh is short and sharp. That's not how any of this works, child. The concubines are slaves, purchased or captured, brought to the palace for one purpose. Refusal isn't a concept that applies. They can hope to be chosen or hope to be overlooked, but refusing. She shakes her head. That would be unthinkable, impossible, a category error in the grammar of palace life. You listen to this exchange feeling complicated emotions you can't quite name. You're a slave yourself, taken from your family, given no choice about your life's direction. The concubines exist in a different category of slavery. Their bodies commodified in ways yours isn't. Their value measured by beauty and fertility rather than labour. Are they better or worse off than you? The question feels unanswerable. They live in greater luxury, certainly. They have the possibility, remote but real, of bearing a son who becomes Sultan, elevating them to unimaginable power. But they're also more vulnerable, their value more precarious, their entire existence dependent on maintaining physical appeal and reproductive capacity. You wouldn't trade places with them. You're not sure they'd trade with you. A commotion interrupts the conversation. Running feet, urgent voices. A eunuch appears, slightly dishevelled, looking for someone. You, he says, pointing at you and two others. The Sultan requires fresh water in his chambers, immediately, and towels. Bring them to the usual door. Don't enter, just leave them. Go now. You scramble to obey, rushing with the others toward the linen storage where clean towels are kept, then to the fountain room where pitchers of water are always ready. Someone grabs the towels, you grab two pitchers, and together you navigate through corridors at a near run, trying not to spill water, trying not to drop anything, trying not to think about what fresh water and towels might mean, what activities might require such provisions. The usual door is in a part of the palace you rarely visit, the Sultan's private quarters, guarded by janissaries who watch your approach with expressions of professional boredom. You set down your pitchers beside the door as instructed. The others place the towels. A hand reaches from inside the door. You glimpse only the hand, nothing beyond it, and pulls the items inside. The door closes. You retreat quickly, mission accomplished, trying not to speculate about what you've just participated in. Back in the corridor, the other servants have moved on to different topics. Someone's brother got married in the city. There's talk of a new taxation policy affecting merchants. A cat has been living in the kitchen and catching mice with impressive efficiency. The conversation is mundane, grounding, a reminder that even in the palace where empires are governed and sultans choose concubines and elaborate rituals mark every action, life is also just life. People still care about their families, still gossip about policies and animals, still exist in the small personal spaces between grand historical forces. You settle back onto your bench, your muscles grateful for the rest, even as your mind remains active. The night is fully dark now, visible through the windows as deep blue-black punctuated by stars. In your village, your former village, you correct yourself, nights were darker than this, truly dark without Istanbul's countless lamps and torches. You could see the Milky Way sprawled across the sky like spilled milk, could count dozens of shooting stars on clear summer nights. Here the city's light competes with the heavens, and the stars lose. Do you miss it? The village? The darkness? The life you had before? The question is complicated. You miss your family desperately, achingly, with a grief that hasn't diminished in 3 years. But do you miss the poverty, the cold winters, the uncertainty, the backbreaking farm labour that was your inevitable future? You're not sure. The palace is prison and privilege simultaneously. You're fed, housed, protected, given work that, while exhausting, doesn't break your body the way agricultural labour would have. But you're also owned, controlled, denied freedom in ways your village self never imagined. The comparison between lives resists simple judgment. Both contained suffering. Both offered their own forms of meaning. Neither was chosen. A yawn overtakes you, jaw-cracking, impossible to suppress. You're tired with the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from 14 hours of continuous labour. Around you, other servants are similarly yawning, eyes growing heavy, bodies slumping against walls. Soon, perhaps within the hour, you'll be dismissed to sleep. The palace will continue operating. It never stops, not truly. But your shift will end, and you'll have a few precious hours of unconsciousness before dawn begins the cycle again. The dismissal finally comes near midnight. A senior servant making rounds, releasing those whose presence is no longer required, assigning others to continue the night watch. You're released, grateful beyond measure, your body aching in so many places that the aches blend into one general state of exhaustion. You trudge through dim corridors toward the servants' sleeping quarters, passing others on similar journeys, all of you too tired for conversation, moving like ghosts through the palace's nighttime silence, broken only by distant fountain sounds and the occasional call of guards confirming their positions. But you don't reach your quarters. Not yet. A different eunuch intercepts you in a corridor. Not the sharp-faced one from earlier, but another, younger, less severe. "Night watch," he says simply, consulting a list. "You're assigned to the Northwest Passage, 3rd level. 4-hour shift. Someone will relieve you at dawn prayer." Your heart sinks. Night watch is among the worst duties, standing for hours in dark corridors, fighting sleep, accomplishing nothing but your presence, serving as a living security measure. Palace paranoia requires guards and watchers everywhere. Servants stationed at strategic points throughout the night, human tripwires who might raise alarm if anything unusual occurs. Nothing unusual ever occurs. You stand in darkness, battling exhaustion, counting minutes that stretch into eternities, and accomplish nothing except demonstrating that the palace can afford to waste your wakeful hours. You follow the eunuch's directions to your assigned post, a corridor intersection on the third level of the northwest wing, a location you've passed through before but never lingered in. The space is utilitarian, undecorated, clearly not meant for anyone important. Two passages intersect here at right angles, creating a junction that requires observation from this specific position. A small alcove contains a stool, a minor mercy, suggesting you're permitted to sit at least, and a single oil lamp burning low, providing just enough light to see by without creating bright illumination that might disturb anyone sleeping nearby. The previous watcher, a girl whose name you don't know, looks immensely relieved when you appear. "Nothing happened," she reports wearily. "Nothing will happen. Nothing ever happens, but you still have to watch." She demonstrates the basic requirements. Remain alert, observe both corridors, note anyone passing through and their purpose if obvious, call for guards if anything seems suspicious. "What counts as suspicious?" you ask. She shrugs. "No idea. In 2 years of night watch, I've never seen anything I'd call suspicious. Just servants on legitimate errands, occasional eunuchs checking that we're awake, nothing more." She leaves, and you're alone. You settle onto the stool, positioning yourself to observe both corridors, and begin the long wait until dawn. The lamp flickers occasionally, throwing moving shadows that your tired brain tries to interpret as people before recognizing them as illusions. The palace makes noises at night, wood creaking as temperatures drop, distant doors closing, wind through ventilation shafts, the ever-present fountains, small sounds that in daylight you'd never notice, but at night seem amplified, significant, sometimes vaguely menacing. You fight sleep through various techniques. You count, getting to 100, starting over, reaching 100 again, an endless cycle of numbers that keeps part of your mind occupied. You recite prayers, both Islamic and Christian, the words providing rhythm and structure to empty time. You compose letters in your head to your family, though you'll never be able to send them, telling them about your life, asking about theirs, maintaining connection through imagination since reality offers no other option. Time becomes strange during night watch. Minutes expand and contract unpredictably. Sometimes you check the lamp's oil level, a rough measure of passing time, and swear only moments have passed, yet the oil has burned down noticeably. Other times, periods that felt like hours turn out to have been mere minutes. Your body exists in rebellion against wakefulness, demanding sleep with increasing urgency, creating false sensations. You hear footsteps that aren't there, see movement in corridors that remain empty. Once even jerk awake from a microsleep you weren't aware you'd entered, terrified you failed your duty. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman palace's elaborate security measures prevented actual threats, or simply created employment for thousands of servants. But from your stool in this empty corridor, the question seems darkly funny. You're a teenage girl with no weapons, no training, no authority, stationed alone in a corridor to watch for threats you wouldn't know how to respond to if they appeared. If someone genuinely dangerous wanted to infiltrate this section, You'd be an inconvenience at best, a victim at worst. The security theatre is comforting to someone, presumably, but probably not actually to anyone's security. Around what you estimate is the second hour, though time estimation has become increasingly unreliable, you hear footsteps approaching. Real footsteps this time, not imagination. You straighten on your stool, trying to look alert rather than exhausted. A figure emerges from the eastern corridor. A eunuch, one of the white eunuchs who serve in the outer palace sections. He nods to you, confirms you're awake and present, asks if you've seen anything unusual. You report that you haven't. He grunts approval and continues on his rounds, checking other watch posts, ensuring the palace's human security net remains intact. After he leaves, the loneliness feels heavier somehow. His presence, however brief, reminded you that you're part of a larger system, that other people are also awake in the palace's depths, also enduring night watches, also fighting sleep, also performing security theatre for an audience that may not exist. But his absence emphasises how isolated these watch positions are, how vulnerable you are to whatever might emerge from these dark corridors, how utterly alone you are with your thoughts and your exhaustion, a quirky aspect of night watch duty. It's when palace servants sometimes experience what they believe are supernatural encounters. You've heard stories, shadows that move wrong, voices from empty rooms, the sensation of being watched by unseen presences, cold spots in corridors that have no windows or drafts. Are the palace's old ghosts real? Byzantine emperors still walking their former hallways? Ottoman princes murdered in succession conflicts, seeking justice or vengeance? Or are these just the products of exhausted minds, sleep-deprived brains creating stimulation when reality offers too little? You're not sure. You've always been skeptical of ghost stories, but alone in this dark corridor at... You check the lamp again. Probably 3 in the morning. Skepticism feels less certain. You don't see ghosts, but you do experience that sensation of being watched, that prickling awareness at the back of your neck that suggests eyes observing you from somewhere you can't see. You turn, scanning both corridors, seeing nothing but shadows and lamplight and empty space. The sensation persists. Maybe it's just paranoia, a natural response to sitting alone in darkness for hours. Maybe the palace really does have presences that aren't human, spirits of the dead who died here in various ways. Old age, disease, murder, execution, childbirth, accidents. All the ways humans exit life in places where thousands have lived across centuries. The eastern corridor lightens almost imperceptibly. Dawn is approaching, that slow shift from night to day that happens so gradually you can't identify the exact moment darkness becomes light. You've survived the watch. You've stayed awake, mostly, and performed your duty, minimally, and will soon be released to collapse on your thin mattress in that windowless room where 11 other servants breathe and shift and occasionally snore. The thought of sleep is almost erotic in its appeal, a pleasure anticipated with desperate intensity. The relief watcher arrives just as the dawn call to prayer begins echoing across the city. She's a younger girl, maybe 13, looking terrified of her first night watch assignment. You give her the same brief orientation you received. Nothing happens, nothing will happen, but watch anyway. You demonstrate the stool's position, show her the lamp oil level, assure her the 4 hours will pass eventually even though they won't feel like they're passing. She nods, wide-eyed, and you leave her to her lonely vigil. You stumble through corridors that are beginning to show signs of the palace's morning awakening. Other servants are emerging from sleeping quarters, faces still creased from pillows, moving through their morning ablutions. You pass them like a ghost yourself, too tired to acknowledge anyone, focused only on reaching your sleeping space before your legs give out entirely. You collapse onto your thin mattress just as the first true light of dawn filters through the ventilation shafts high in the wall of your windowless chamber. Around you, your roommates are already stirring, preparing for the day's duties, but exhaustion pulls you down into sleep before you can even remove your shoes. You're granted a brief mercy. Someone, perhaps recognizing you've just completed night watch, covers you with a thin blanket and lets you sleep while others begin their morning routines. The sounds fade to distant murmurs as unconsciousness claims you completely, utterly, drawing you down into darkness deeper than any corridor you've watched through the night. When you wake, disoriented and confused, the sun is already well risen. You've slept perhaps 4 hours, maybe 5, and while it's not enough, will never be enough given the exhaustion that lives in your bones, it's what you have. Your body aches in new configurations as you sit up, muscles stiff from the night watch, from carrying trays, from all the bending and lifting and standing that constitutes your daily labour. You're 16 years old, and you feel ancient, weathered, used in ways that leave no visible marks but change you nonetheless at some fundamental level. You perform your ablutions mechanically, splash water on your face, change into a clean uniform, or at least a different uniform, cleanliness being a relative concept when you own exactly 3 sets of clothes and wash them whenever you have the energy and time, which isn't often enough. The room is empty now, your roommates already deployed to their various duties throughout the palace. You're late to whatever assignment awaits you, but Night Watch grants some tolerance for late starts. The palace understands, in its way, that human bodies have limits even if those limits are inconvenient to operational requirements. You emerge into a palace in full daylight operation, servants everywhere engaged in the endless tasks that keep this elaborate machine functioning. You report to the duty officer who assigns you to garden maintenance again, light duty, a recognition of your night watch service, or perhaps just random chance. Either way, you're grateful. Working in gardens is as close to pleasant as palace service gets. Fresh air, natural beauty, physical labour that produces visible results rather than the abstract accomplishment of having stood in a corridor for 4 hours. The gardens are already awake with activity. Senior gardeners directing operations, water carriers moving between fountains and flower beds, servants deadheading roses and jasmine, trimming hedges into geometric precision, sweeping pathways of leaves and fallen petals. You join a crew working on the tulip beds, those flowers that Ottoman culture prizes above almost all others, cultivating rare varieties, paying fortunes for particularly beautiful bulbs, holding festivals celebrating their blooms. The tulips are past their spring peak now, entering their summer dormancy. But they still require care, removing spent flowers, ensuring proper watering, checking for diseases or pests. You kneel in the soil, your hands in earth that's been enriched with centuries of careful cultivation, and for the first time in days you feel something like peace. Do you remember the gardens of your childhood? There weren't any, not really. Your village was about survival, about crops that fed people rather than flowers that pleased eyes. But your mother kept herbs in clay pots near the house entrance, and you remember their scents, remember touching their leaves and bringing your fingers to your nose to smell rosemary, thyme, sage, different plants than these palace specimens, humbler and more practical, but plants nonetheless, living things that connected earth to sky, that transformed sunlight into green growth through processes that still seem like magic, even though you've been taught they're natural. You work through the morning, through the afternoon heat when most palace residents retreat to shaded rooms, through the slow cooling as evening approaches. The work is meditative, repetitive, allowing your spine to drift while your hands remain occupied. You think about the Valide Sultan's letters, about the carpet merchant's coded messages, about the dangerous game you've been drawn into. You think about Hurrem, the concubine with red gold hair who's catching the Sultan's attention, wondering whether she'll leverage that attention into lasting power, or whether she'll be another favourite who fades when novelty wears off. You think about your family in Serbia, wonder whether they're alive, whether they think of you, whether they've had more children to replace the ones taken by the devshirme levy. You think about freedom, that distant, impossible dream that the Valide Sultan dangled before you. Manumission, the legal end of slavery, the transformation from owned person to free person, from property to human. What would you do with freedom if you achieved it? Where would you go? You can't return to your village. You've changed too much, know too much, exist too uncomfortably between Christian and Muslim, between Serbian and Turkish, between the child you were and the person you're becoming. But you could go somewhere, find work as a skilled servant in a wealthy household using your palace training. Maybe save enough to open a small business. You've learned things about textile care, about food preparation, about organisation and management that have market value beyond palace walls. The fantasy unfolds in your mind. A small shop in Istanbul selling something useful. Not carpets. That merchant's world seems dangerous. But perhaps soap. Those luxurious olive oil and laurel concoctions the palace uses. You could make them. You've watched the process. Understand the ratios of oils and ash. The addition of scents and herbs. It's a modest dream, nothing grand, but it's yours. A life where you wake up by choice rather than by obligation, where your labour benefits yourself rather than distant masters, where you make decisions about your own existence within whatever constraints freedom still imposes, because even free people aren't truly free from necessity, from hunger, from mortality. But at least the chains would be circumstantial rather than legal, economic rather than ontological. Historians still argue whether manumission was common or rare in Ottoman society, whether the path from slavery to freedom was well-trodden or exceptional. But you've heard enough stories to know it happens. Some slaves are freed in their master's wills, a final act of generosity or guilt. Some purchase their freedom, accumulating money through tips and gifts, buying themselves back from bondage. Some are freed as rewards for exceptional service or loyalty. The mechanisms exist. The possibility is real, however remote. And the Valide Sultan has suggested she might grant you this if you continue serving her secret purposes, continue being useful and discreet and reliably invisible. Is it worth the risk? The question haunts you. Safety lies in pure anonymity, in being so unremarkable that no one notices you, in performing your duties adequately without distinction, in surviving through sheer blandness until... what? Until you grow old in palace service, eventually pensioned off to some marginal existence, still not free but also not actively enslaved. That's not much of a future either. Maybe the gamble is worth it. Maybe being noticed by the Valide Sultan, being useful to her schemes, carrying her secret letters and receiving her cryptic promises, maybe that's the best chance you'll ever have to escape this life that's wearing you down to nothing. The sun is setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and pink that seem almost too beautiful to be real, as though someone painted them onto the heavens for purely aesthetic reasons. The garden crew is finishing their work, gathering tools, preparing to return them to storage before the evening meal. You stand, brushing soil from your knees, feeling your body's accumulated exhaustion, that deep tiredness that sleep only partially addresses because it's not just physical but existential, the exhaustion of endurance, of continuing when continuation feels impossible. You join the procession of servants heading toward the communal dining area, where you'll eat a simple meal, nothing like the elaborate feasts you serve to royalty, but adequate, nutritious enough to keep you functioning. You'll eat quickly, mechanically, fueling your body for whatever evening duties await. Then perhaps you'll have a few hours before sleep, time to sit quietly somewhere, to exist without performing labour, to simply be rather than do. Those hours are precious small islands of self in the ocean of service that constitutes your life. And tomorrow will be identical to today, which was identical to yesterday, which will be identical to the day after tomorrow. The palace runs on repetition, on routines so ingrained they become automatic, on cycles that repeat endlessly like the seasons, like the tides, like the turning of the earth beneath unchanging stars. You'll wake before dawn, wash at the fountain, pray in Arabic while thinking in Serbian, dress the princesses or wash the laundry or carry the meals or stand the watch, navigating hierarchies and protocols and invisible rules, surviving through competence and invisibility, and small compromises that erode something essential but keep you alive. Is this enough? Is survival enough? The question has no good answer. Survival is simultaneously everything, the precondition for all else, and insufficient, not the same as living, not the same as flourishing, not the same as freedom. But it's what you have, it's what you do. You survive, day after day, night after night, year after year, you endure. And maybe someday, if you're very lucky and very careful and very useful to the right powerful people, survival will transform into something more. Maybe you'll hold those manumission papers in your shaking hands, feel the weight of legal freedom, walk out of the palace gates not as a servant on an errand, but as a free person beginning a different life. Or maybe not. Maybe you'll grow old here, become one of those weathered senior servants who train the next generation, who carry institutional knowledge, who remember when things were different before they became the same again. Maybe you'll die here, suddenly or slowly, your body giving out, or disease claiming you, or simply time wearing you down until there's nothing left. People die in the palace, servants disappear. No one marks their passing with monuments or ceremonies. They're just gone, replaced by fresh children from the next devshirme levy. The system perpetuating itself through the consumption of human lives transformed into human labour. But tonight, right now, in this moment between work and sleep, you're alive. Your heart beats. Your lungs fill with evening air that smells of jasmine and distant cooking fires, and the complex scent of Istanbul spreading around the palace in all directions. City of cities, crossroads of empires, place where east meets west, and millions of lives intersect in patterns too complex for any individual to comprehend. You're alive, and that's something. You're here, and that means something, even if you're not sure what. You survived today. You'll survive tomorrow. And in that survival, in that continuation against all the forces that grind people down to nothing, there's a kind of triumph, too small to name but too real to dismiss. The gardens are darkening now, the flowers losing their colours to dusk, transforming into shapes and shadows. Soon the lamps will be lit, the palace illuminated against the night, another cycle beginning. You turn from the gardens, from the beauty that offers comfort but no solutions, and walk back into the palace's marble embrace. Your feet know the way. Your body moves on autopilot. Your mind drifts to that recurring fantasy of freedom, while your reality remains firmly constrained by walls and protocols and the simple fact of your bondage. Tomorrow the sun will rise again. Tomorrow you'll wake again. Tomorrow you'll serve again. And somehow, impossibly, miraculously, tragically, that's enough. It has to be. Because the alternative is despair, and despair is a luxury you cannot afford when survival requires every ounce of strength, every moment of attention, every small reserve of hope you can manufacture from circumstances that offer precious little reason for hope. You enter the corridor. You move toward food, toward rest, toward sleep that will be too brief before dawn calls you to begin again. The palace surrounds you. Beautiful prison, elaborate cage, the only home you have left. And within its walls, carrying its secrets, performing its rituals, enduring its demands, you continue, you survive, you persist. And in a world that seems designed to erase people like you, that persistence is its own quiet form of resistance, its own small victory, its own defiant declaration that you existed, that you mattered, that you were here. The corridor stretches ahead, familiar and endless. You walk it one more time, as you have thousands of times before, as you will thousands of times again if you're fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to endure that long. One step, then another still. This is your life. This is your story. This is what it means to be a servant in the Ottoman palace, to be simultaneously everything that keeps this world functioning, and nothing in the eyes of those who rule it, to be essential and invisible, powerful and powerless, present and erased, to live in contradiction, to survive in paradox, to continue simply against all odds, because continuation is all you have left. And as you settle into sleep that final time, your breathing slowing, your body releasing the day's tensions into darkness, you allow yourself to dream. Not the complicated dreams of ambition or revenge or dramatic transformation, but simple dreams of small comforts, a morning without obligations, your mother's voice singing a Serbian lullaby you've almost forgotten, warm bread fresh from the oven, eaten slowly without rushing, sitting by water that belongs to no one, watching light dance on its surface with nothing required of you except presence. These dreams are gentle now, soft-edged and forgiving, asking nothing, demanding nothing, simply existing alongside your sleeping form like companions keeping watch while you rest. The palace sounds fade to distant music. Fountain water becomes rain on village roofs. Marble transforms to earth under bare feet, and somewhere in the depths of sleep, you return briefly to the child you were before the levy, before the palace, before everything changed. You're whole there, in that dreaming space, not divided between languages or faiths or identities, just yourself, complete and uncomplicated, loved without condition, belonging without question. And though you'll wake to different truths, though dawn will call you back to service and survival and the careful navigation of power that defines palace life, for now, in sleep's merciful kingdom, you're free. Your breathing deepens, softens, becomes a rhythm indistinguishable from the palace's heartbeat, from Istanbul's collective breath, from the tide of history washing over individuals while somehow, miraculously, failing to erase them completely. You existed. You matter. You were here. And tomorrow, when the cycle begins again, you'll continue to exist, to matter, to be here. One more day, one more night, surviving, persisting, dreaming of futures you might never see but can't quite stop imagining. Sleep now, rest now. Let the story hold you as you've held it. Sweet dreams, servant of the palace, daughter of Serbia, child of empire, carrier of secrets, keeper of small hopes. Sweet dreams.